I'm in Connecticut, by the way. Hey, everybody,
Oh.
Dr. Mike Dusa here. How are you? MTFU Longevity over 50. We've got a really famous guy here right now. I'm just gonna warn you or give you some foreboding. I'm gonna rip off your head and shit down your neck. How'd I do, Pete? Am I ready for my SAG card? Probably not.
not
Pete,
quite, but that's a plausible start.
I got no mirrors in here or anything. Pete, I'm going to describe him, and a lot of you know who he is. One of his iconic roles was the Swede from Heartbreak Ridge with Clint Eastwood, and we all know that movie, and everybody's really enthused about that. But for all the other things he's done and accolades that he's earned, one of the things I want to mention is the word ageless, because I think he embodies that. He's emblematic of that. And a lot of the things we do here on some of our sites and in the business and the practice is we focus on aging without getting old. We're looking at chronology versus your physiology. Pete's 58, but I don't know exactly what metrics I would use, but if I had to assume, I'd say he has a physiology and the health of maybe somebody 28. So much more far afield or behind where his chronology would tell us he is right now. And again, I always say this, if he were my patient and I were to open the chart, I'd write patient presents much younger than their stated age. And some people say, oh, doc, you're all about how people look. Not really, but one of the things we have to use is, look, I'm sure Pete, he's the top level trainer in California now, and he would likely agree. I'm not telling you to agree, Pete, by the way. My girl was saying, hey, when you say the person will agree, they may feel they have to agree. You don't have to. But part of good health is how somebody projects. And also, I can just look at somebody and tell their low test. I mean, can you kind of do that? Some of the factors.
Yeah, I agree with that. I read some years ago that a learned doctor, and certainly someone in your category, can sort of almost diagnose, but certainly summarize somebody's overall health by just having them take their shirt off as much as anything.
Yes.
I'm sort of in that category. This is judgment, not with any negativity attached to it, but it's really making sort of a clinical judgment on to add to that, Mike, that it's not only how somebody looks in a swimsuit, as I like to say, but it's also how they move.
Right.
And that's where I might take a bit of a tangent from the principles. And by the way, I love bodybuilding. I grew up a bodybuilding fan. If it wasn't for my love of reading bodybuilding magazines
we'll talk about how you got corralled even by Joe Weider found you,
Yeah. But the bodybuilding is a singular focus on hypertrophy, building your muscles as big as they can be. And coming from a sports background myself, like my muscles are really important to me because I was a defensive lineman and I need to build. Guess what? There's no weak defensive linemen that are doing very well out there. So
I've got pointed questions for you to expand on that. So let's just start.
Okay.
Everybody, believe me, especially in our, my extension and my sphere of influence, most people here know who you are. And, they want to emulate people like you, and they're not going to do everything you do, but they want a little bit of what you got. Maybe they'll pick up one tip or something that they're not doing that's missing that may put them to the next level. Because you can always improve a little bit every day. But, everybody, to get like Pete at 58, it's not going to happen right away. And a lot of factors, it depends on how much damage you've done. You may have to backtrack for a long time. And most of us have more years behind us than we do ahead of us. So you want to be, efficient with what you have left. But Pete played in the NFL 5 years. He was the #1 draft pick of the Cincinnati Bengals. He was number 16 pick, and he didn't even know that was coming. He was an All-American in Maryland. Still a big football fan. I've got some football-related questions that some of you guys forwarded to me, and we'll get to those. But he went through 5 years in the NFL, and then he had some of the elements that are espoused in Hollywood, so he pursued a career there. And to this day, he still works in Hollywood and movies and film and TV and things, all kinds of cool things just like that. So he was one of those people. Like a lot of the guests we have on here, everybody here has some degree of fame from the fitness or athletic world, but they've also used that to bridge into the rest of their life and to continue with what they learned to be really good in physique or athletics and to help engender better life, health, longevity, and feeling like a kid well into your later years. So that's really what we're all about here. So Pete, you're from the East Coast like me. Okay, Long Island, right?
Strong Island, yeah.
Yeah. Strong Island. I like that. So how'd you start training? You were playing football in high school.
Yeah. And here's where it started out. Here's where I was lucky, because it's just by the virtue of where my parents bought a house and where I grew up in New Hyde Park in Nassau County, Long Island. At that time, this was in the mid, all the way through the 70s. My high school was flat out a powerhouse when it came to football. It's not anymore, but it was then, and it was a blessing. So I knew kind of playing, beginning of youth football, playing when I was 7 years old, but I had, 6 years old. I had to play with the 7-year-olds because you couldn't weigh more than 95 pounds, and I was this big around, but I was like so tall. So I always played with the older kids, but that always.
Hey, let me interject. You're 6'6" right now, which is rather tall. When did you know you were going to be really tall? Were you tall in like middle school or high school? You taller?
Right. Really tall. So like when I was in like first or second grade, there's the pediatricians have like a height chart, and you measure how tall that kid is, and you kind of project them out. And I was projected to be 6'10", so I kind of slowed down
6'10"
really fast when I was, I don't know, I guess 7. Like I was 6'6" when I was 17. So and that was it. That's the end. Some people grow for a little bit longer than that. So I'm like 6'6.5", and but I knew I had this potential. And when I got to the junior varsity level, so here's two things that you can't coach a kid, right? Height and length, right? Levers. I had these giant levers, and the second thing is I was fast.
You were fast.
I was quick. That's quick and fast. And the third thing, the emotional thing, is that what separates football or any sort of other contact sport was I always, it was never a hesitation. I had the mentality for a contact sport. So that was a done deal. So I had all those three things going for me. The varsity coach, we had a co-varsity head coaches, and one of them, John Kalo, who played his college football at the Naval Academy.
Wow.
He played with Roger Staubach. Wow. And he was very fit, and he was always in the weight room. And he to me, him even acknowledging me when I was in 9th grade was like made me shake. And he said to me, "Koch, you got potential, but you've got to get in the weight room. You got to get stronger. You got to put muscles on that frame." And I was like, "All right, and he goes, "Get in the weight room. We'll help you do it. Just start showing up." And I was like, "All right." And I was good at taking instruction. And so again, that started me. The muscle magazines. I talked to my dad. Is there anything I can I have one thing? Can I have one thing? Can I have some weights in the basement? Got a little weight set.
So you had supportive parents, and you and I both know in the 70s, weightlifting wasn't very popular. So a lot of times the kids didn't get support. Just jumping ahead, you can expand on that in a second. Especially with a guy with long arms, and one of your favorite bodybuilders, Arnold, of course, but for strength was Franco. For height, you like Ferrigno because he was almost your height, and then of course you like the beach potential of Dave Draper. You were able to bench. You had a record, I think, at Maryland, 465 pounds.
Right.
That's extraordinary for somebody. Usually people with longer arms in that age. That was considered very strong.
It was at the University of Maryland. They took a great deal of pride in their strength and conditioning program, and they had on the walls who was the all-time bench press record. You got your picture up on the wall, and there was a 400-pound bench press club, and then who was the highest, and then it was the same thing with a power clean, and the same thing with a squat. So those were the things. And then to a lesser degree, they kept records on who could do the most pull-ups and dips. I think those were the 5 categories, but the big 3. So I took a lot of pride. Randy White, the Hall of Fame, Dallas Cowboy, great. He held the record, and I beat his record. So
wow. We're mentioning. So you ended up being very good in high school, obviously, because did you get recruited by colleges, or Maryland picked you up? Or
yeah, I was recruited by several schools. I took visits to Syracuse, Northwestern, Temple. So kind of the local, kind of the Northeast was recruiting me at that time.
Who was the coach of Maryland at that time?
A guy named Jerry Claiborne.
Okay, I remember that.
Who my second year there, he actually left Maryland and took a job at his alma mater, Kentucky. So he left, and I got another coach named, which really was a blessing in disguise, because we had a coach, and then I'm just blanking on his name, but I'll think of it in a second. But,
yeah, okay, it'll come back to you.
But my senior year, I'm very proud. We got that team. Just to give people a historical perspective, my senior year was the same senior class as Boomer Esiason.
Oh, wow, right.
And we had head coach's name was Bobby Ross.
So you guys both got drafted by Cincinnati then, right?
Yeah. Both Long Island guys went to Maryland. I was the captain of that team. We won at that time we were in the ACC. Wow. So we were the ACC champions. So it was quite a successful group. Yeah.
Hey, Pete, here's an interesting question. Since you didn't really see what was coming, and we'll go on with that. When you first played in front of like 70,000 people, what was that like? Was it just like when you were in your first movie? Was it? What do you think in your head? Can you even imagine it? And was it intimidating in any way?
You know, I had a chance to sort of ease into that. Really, my first look at a massive stadium was I guess it was the bowl game in my freshman year, but in reality, you know, so I was soaking that in as a guy that was sitting on the bench. In reality, as I was working my tail off in college, believe me, I was thin, I was quick and fast, and had a great attitude when I showed up to Maryland, but I was way undersized. And part of my attraction to the University of Maryland was their commitment to their strength and conditioning program. I wanted to be that guy that developed like Randy White did, another guy that showed up thin. Randy White's from Delaware, showed up thin and small, and took over the weight room and just put the team on his back. And I wanted to be the next guy to do that. I wasn't a starter until my senior year. And wow. I guess it made everything, you know, the success of my senior year being all ACC and all American is extra rewarding, because it took me extra time to get into that position.
Two things. When you went there, did they try to change your position because they saw you were rather slight of build? And also, you didn't see, obviously, from everything you just said, you didn't really think you were going to be a #1 draft pick, right? So that came as a shock. So the first thing, did they try to change your position due to your physicality?
I spent one day on the offensive line, and I said, you guys are thinking in the wrong direction here. I'm barely big enough to play defensive end, no less the lineup and tackle. But that was a fail. That was a failed experiment. Then the other play, I started both at the defensive line, defensive end, and tight end in high school. I was actually all league as a tight end, not a defensive end in high school. And most of the schools that recruited me were recruiting me as a tight end. So, and I said, well, how you want to take a few snaps at tight end? I was just so far back on the depth chart at defensive end, and I said, no, I don't want to move. I want to stay here.
To my limited knowledge, I would think really good height and speed is ideal for a defensive end. Isn't it coming around the corner? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I saw it. I saw the potential. I just needed time. I really, in every sense of my life, I was like a late bloomer, and I just needed to go through that process and spend more time in the weight room, which is what I did. I dedicated myself to that weight room. That was year round, and the off season was just as fun for me as the regular season because I was spending more time in the weight room.
Growing up through high school, two questions here, and college, was nutrition important? Now, obviously it's important, but was it stressed, and did you adhere to something consistent or strict? And what was my other question? Well, just answer that one first if you could.
You know, it's interesting because reading the muscle magazines, you know, growing up, and I literally took like my allowance, and I was buying the Weider magazine, Muscle and Fitness, and then there was this small magazine, right? What was it called? Iron Man. Yeah, it was yellow and white, Pete. Yeah. Yeah, but it was small.
I have some right under here. I read those. I don't read the stuff now. Yeah. I read about you 30 years ago.
Okay, so I'm reading the small one, and I was learning about that was back with the NABBF and the
NABBF. Right. Yeah, from England. Yes.
Yeah, yes. So that was great. So I was learning anyway. So as I'm reading this stuff, and I'm trying to get the edge also on the as well as the workouts, but the nutrition. And then I just said, this is something that keeps on coming back to this. You have to have adequate amount of protein in your diet. And so how in the world am I going to, I'm like, all right, what is this? Chicken. This means fish, chicken. There was no way I could, my mother just could not understand a conversation about, I need more chicken on my plate or something. So I said this, let me take this approach. Hey, Ma, can I get some protein powder? What do you want protein powder for?
Yeah.
Because I want to look like the guys in the magazine.
Yeah.
Well, you doing it in the basement every night? No, I need to have the protein. All right, let's go. So we go, and I get the only thing that I could figure out how to buy was this stuff called Hoffman's, and you had to take like a screwdriver to flip the lid off. The canister was like cardboard, and it had a lid like this, and you put your nose in there.
Pete, our average member here is 50 years old, so they all know about how bad it was. You had to take down that stuff. You had to really want to get gains. So yeah, you were using that.
Yeah, you just tried to like smother the taste with enough ice cream in there, which was fine for me because I was trying to gain.
Yes.
So I just pounded the Hoffman's. I didn't
Then
know.
he had any desiccated liver and stuff like that.
Yes. Got the pills, and then I had read I'm trying to choke down these pills, and then I had read someplace that you could put them in a blender, and you get powder, and it's easier to choke that. I didn't recommend that either. That was terrible. But I was trying to choke those down for a while, but I just couldn't deal with it.
Juxtapose this, if you would. A very good friend of mine from Pumping Iron, Mike Katz, probably know who he is. He played for the Jets. He played for the Jets, and he was in Pumping Iron. But he told me, he said, listen, me and two other guys lifted weights on the team. And he was the year before 69 with Namath when they won the Super Bowl. And he hurt his knee, and that was it. And then he went on to win Mr. America and all that stuff. But I guess, what the hell was the coach's name? It'll come to me. But he'd come in the room.
Was that Weeb Eubank?
Yes. There you go. You're the historian here.
The Jets, that was my team.
Yeah, there you go. Right. We live right over there. He'd come in, he'd be like, hell's bells, boys. What's going on in here? We got a game tomorrow. But then Mike said they were kind of averse to it, but then he'd run over everybody the next day, so they were okay with it. But it was the attitude kind of was, just do it on your own, make sure you're on the field. Whereas you started playing in 85, obviously things had, progressed to where everybody, you had a training complexes, all that stuff, right?
Yeah, we had, and that probably the one of the leaders of that movement was the strength coach with the Nebraska, and he had what is his name? Boyd Epley.
Is he the one? Is he? Hey, Pete, is he the one that? The first pro team, from what I've read, you may correct me, but I think this is true, was the Chargers. They were the first to so that was him.
No, that wasn't him. That was the guy from Tulane.
Yes. You know what? I should have, man. And this.
Yeah. Well, somebody will know.
See, I'm like you. I haven't been hit in the head 100 times by the offensive guy, so I got no excuse. I can't remember.
So they're around the same time, but probably Boyd Epley was the guy that gets the credit probably for really forging and popularizing strength training at the college level when Nebraska was winning a national championships. And then, and I'm at a loss for his name, but there was a strength coach at LSU who was the first, the charge, I think it was around 1960, early 60s. And a friend of mine, Ron Mix, was on that team with that coach, and he had all the guys strength training there. And that was a part of, that's when the AFC was separate from the NFL before the merger. And that was part of how the AFC established itself as a more forward-thinking league. And then everybody was lifting after that. But it took a little bit of time.
Robert Thompson is suggesting, I don't know, maybe you put this out there, or maybe he's suggesting this. Did you drink a gallon of milk a day back then?
I drank a lot of milk. I might have mentioned in an interview at some point over the years that I drank a lot of milk. And I was reading straight from the Bible itself, which was Iron Man and Muscle and Fitness magazine. And if I read any one of my favorites, Serge Nubret or whoever, I might have read, drink that much milk, and I would give it a shot. I drank a lot of milk in college, I'll tell you that, because we had a culture of guys that were trying to gain weight and muscle and power. And I hung out with those guys, and milk was a staple of what we ate.
Pete, this is great stuff you're giving here, because it does tie into longevity. I want to ask you a question, kind of jumping around. We'll still get back to the framework, because I don't want to skip anything. This is gold. These are jewels that you're giving us. given that you're now a longevity guy. I mean, I know you train people and all that, but the end result, you're trying to prevent cell death and people feeling better and living longer. I've read that the average NFL lineman, that wouldn't be you. A defensive end's not considered a lineman. When they say lineman, they're talking about the guys on the offense.
Yeah, no, I'm one of them. Any guy that puts his hand on the ground, that's me. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, the guys now especially, they say that the average NFL lineman dies at 55. And I met a guy a few years ago, Matt Burke. He was the center for Minnesota. He was an Ivy League guy. And he's noted for, he was 300. He's slimmed down to 2.25. Now he's doing ads and stuff. But I was talking to him, not that I wouldn't have known this. He says, look, I remember he said this. He said, how many guys do you see that make it to 80 that weigh 280? And very good point. Even if it's muscle or fat, and it's usually not muscle at that age, the heart can no longer push against all that resistance. So I'm not going to say would you agree, but what do you think as far as reducing your body's volume or mass as you get older for at least health reasons?
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence to suggest, those that are studying longevity, to suggest that whatever your frame size is, that you keep that thing as lean as possible, and it's gonna benefit you on a number of different levels. I've got a great friend and mentor and person I work with named Dr. Robert Huizinga. I was fortunate enough to finish my career with the Raiders, and that was the LA Raiders. That was the Marcus Allen, Howie Long Raiders, 1989. And part of the blessing of finishing with that team was the team doctor was Robert Huizinga. Some people would know him as, if they can recall, the TV show that ran for 17 seasons, The Biggest Loser.
Yeah.
And however you feel about The Biggest Loser, it was kind of cheesy. It was a game show. It was a contest show. A bunch of fat people lost weight quickly. The producer of that show was a patient of Dr. Huizinga. One thing, a quick background of Dr. Huizinga. He's 10 years older than me. He was he's from upstate New York. He was a prodigy as a wrestler. He was state champ. He goes to Michigan. Wow. Valedictorian, but he goes to Michigan, and he's a 3-time Pac-10 champion at Michigan, a junior Olympic wrestler, prodigy, brilliant, studies chemistry, and goes to Harvard Medical School.
May I interject? I've got a couple of guys that have been on the show here. They were Greco-Roman Division I championship wrestlers, and I've talked to others, and maybe you would think about this and say yes or no. They all say to a man, they've all done bodybuilding, different type. One guy's going for the world championships in indoor rowing now, and they all say the hardest training, all encompassing, is wrestling. Well,
Rob Huizinga, I think, would attest to that. He was also a high school football player, but the wrestling challenged him. But I think it's an amazing sport. I kind of missed out on that because I would play basketball in the winter season. But Dr. Huizinga is sort of uniquely, he's an internal medicine doctor, a sports medicine credential, an infectious disease specialist. And he was hired by Al Davis himself when the Raiders originally moved from Oakland to Los Angeles. And he was the team doctor at that time. And after the team went back to Oakland, he was always had his practice, and then he ended up being the doctor for The Biggest Loser. And over the last decade, he's run a fat loss and wellness clinic out of his property in Malibu. It's a majestic property, and he's hired me over the years. He runs it intermittently, and he's hired me.
I've seen you there online. I've seen you.
Yeah, I took some cool pictures. It's an amazing property.
Very nice.
To be his head trainer up there, and I learned a lot about how. By the way, it's not to get on a tangent, but it's like a separate, if somebody is morbidly obese, it's a bit of a different creature to take that person on as a client and to train them. There's some special considerations.
Pete, define what you mean when you say morbidly.
Like 100 pounds off the mark. Right. Basically. And so we had a lot of folks up there like that, but even if you're 70, 80 pounds off the mark, there's a lot going on that needs to consider relative to a person that's, let's say, the average person that reaches out to a professional trainer for some help might be 10, 20, 30 pounds off the mark, but 80 pounds, 100 pounds is way different. But I learned so much about how to help people to lose weight, both from a nutrition and a physical fitness standpoint, from Dr. Huizinga. Just invaluable lessons. And I think that what I took away from that experience in totality was these people want to live. They have by and large, the people that were up there they're already super achievers. The lawyers and the guys running businesses, a general manager of a sports team, and yet they find themselves, how in the world did I get to this point with my physical body? I'm responsible to my spouse. I've got children. I've got 100 or 800 employees. I've got a private plane. What in the world is going on here? And so it's like a very special place in my heart to help people that have found themselves in that sort of that predicament. But I've learned how to help those folks. I'm circling back slowly. Forgive me. No, they know they want to live, and they know they need to get the weight off to accomplish that, because anybody who's real heavy when they die or makes it to 80 is just an outlier, and it's probably not going to be them. They need to get their weight down for the two big the big bucket items, which are to live a complete life in its length, and secondly, the quality of that life. Collectively, I would call that health span.
Health span. I like that. Hey, you mentioned Al Davis. Did you meet him? Did you talk to him? Did he tell you
my contract with him? Yeah.
Did he tell you to just win, baby? And then he told him that you're going to rip his head off and crap down his neck?
I don't know if it went exactly that way, but he was, it's interesting, the timing of your question, because we just kind of came off the importance of really keeping your weight appropriate.
Yeah.
Some argument for, sort of underweight. But Al Davis was fit. Like, you never saw that. He didn't have wasn't like buff, but he was 32-inch waist, I would say. Yeah. And here's a story that it just flashed into my brain because you thought of this. I was at that point in my career, that was my last stop. I had 3 major orthopedic surgeries. It was a long shot that I even made the Raiders team. And here I was, and we're a few games into the season, and it's the middle of the week. I'm still the last guy to leave the weight room. So I was the last guy to get out of the weight room, and then I took the last guy to get in the shower, out of the shower, and I'm walking out of the practice facility, which is at the time in El Segundo, California. And I see, I could hear something like a go and a time and what, and I look, and I can see back past the locker rooms to the practice field with one light on, and I gotta check myself. I'm gonna take a look at this. I mean, everybody had already been gone for half an hour at this point. It was late at night, and I look, and I see somebody out there striding, and they have a black windbreaker on and white bell bottoms and black shoes, and it's Al Davis running wind sprints. I can't make this up. And who's out there that I heard the voice was our strength coach, a guy named Mother Dunn, who's strength coach with I think he's with the Ravens now. And he was out there, and he was I never heard this. I never heard after it. The next day I said, Mother, did I see you out there? You were timing Coach Davis. He goes, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that.
Ultimately, when you're an old man and hopefully wafting peacefully into the next chapter, you have good memories and experiences. That's all you have, and you certainly do. Let me ask you a question. I'm going to touch back upon something you said about CEOs, because I deal with some of them too, and real captains of their industry, and they control a business. They control this big sphere, maybe 800 employees. They're controlling great outcomes for their business, but then you see there's no control here. How do you explain that? I mean, do you think that person, they might be a hell of a person, but the fact is, do you think they're being as real as they could? Do you think they've kind of lost themselves a little because, the credibility is maybe in question? Because if you can't, obviously look at the shape you're in, you got to have a lot more knowledge, but it certainly helps.
Yeah, and that was always interesting. So one of the features of the wellness center that we would do, and we hope to do those again soon here with Dr. Huizinga, is they were small groups of folks, and it was typically picture like 8 people around a large table, and Dr. Huizinga would have dinner with the folks many nights during the week, and he'd invite me to sit in on that, and that was basically the group. And like I said, so you're sitting there with 6 or 8 of these super achievers, and they're paying their fee to be up there and be in this environment, and have me work them out 3 times a day, and eat the food that is being prescribed the way of Dr. Huizinga. And they would talk to the troops at night. So, and he is a plain spoken man. And he would, they would sort of drill down, because what's going on and what's going on in your life. And I would say this, and to put not to paint with too broad a brush, but I would say these are people who are very, very good at what they do. They're the 1% that were able to, most had advanced college degrees, and to sort of take that and add some ingenuity and add a vision, and they became super achievers in their field. And in that process, they took their eye off the mark. Sometimes I heard them, and many of these people were very, very open with me, that they experienced a lot of pain when they were young, and they feel like there's some connection that and at times the therapy would be the right course that would be added to their program at the wellness center. And other people would simply say that they have it's a matter of they never gained the principles, the foundations that they could put their arms around and make smart choices when it came to nutrition. And one way I like to phrase this, if you're going to be fit and kind of be a leader in terms of fitness and health, you need to be working out 6 days a week. That's what I say. And that's 6 decisions a week. Most people to eat well, most people eat 4 times a day, sometimes 5. Let's say 5 times a day. We'll include snacks too. Times 7 days a week. You need this to survive no matter what. That's 35 decisions a week. How you doing? How you doing on those? How would you grade yourself on those 35 decisions a week? It's a big number. And some people are very frank about it. I don't even know where to start on that. So we did a lot of educating the folks with the Dr. Huizinga's program. And I think that I found that to be invaluable and also empowering to the folks there, where now they were pulling back into that sense of control over the requirements of good nutrition. Additionally, they understood that it was a pipe dream to think that some kind of a group exercise class with a low intensity for 35 minutes 3 times a week was going to do a damn thing. It won't. You need more than that. We're grown-ups here. Let's talk play. You need more than that.
Pete, we've got 3 questions, but I want to offer something to you. I had Tony Pearson on here last week, 1978 Mr. America. You might know him. He wrote a book, Driven, and he had a very abusive childhood. And we talked about a great book, by the way, bestseller. And that's what drives him to, warp his body into this muscular, marvel at the age of 63. I'll mention Ferrigno and Schwarzenegger. Schwarzenegger wrote in his book, he said, his father would tell him to go out and choose a switch to bring back so his father would beat him. And he'd have his brother beat him, and just this crazy stuff. And then Ferrigno, a lot of tumult at home. His father was a cop, and he would chase him down the street with a service revolver. So, that's probably just one example of what you had 7 days a week, 24 hours, 365. So when you see those boxers go in the ring and they're beating a snot, listen, I admire them, but you think about the motive. The motivation is to render someone else unconscious. I mean, I took an oath to do no harm, so it's kind of counterintuitive to what I do. But to get guys to do that, or to pound the iron, or to suffer on a diet, you didn't come out of Cambridge drinking tea with a governess. You had and maybe you're talking about these CEOs, and you just kind of inferred a little bit where there's something burning under them, this urgency. Do you see that other people may not have?
Yeah, I really was intrigued by many of the folks. I mean, and I've had the chance to work with some A-list actors and training them, and just people that are leaders in their field, and just have a dialogue with them about what, sort of identify, what's holding you back from making those decisions that are really going to lead to the result that you're looking for. You want your body to look better, feel better. You want to move better. And again, sometimes if it's as simple as education, you're lucky because you can coach all these folks up. But if it's you kind of, when you get to know people, you find that they might be saying, I don't know, something's holding me back. I don't know why I chose to make that, have 3 desserts last night. I just didn't make any sense to me, but there was nothing, there's nothing regulating me at that time. And maybe that's a good word right there. That sort of self-regulation, where some people have that sort of in check. I'm imperfect with my nutrition for sure, but I do that bit of my brain that sort of regulates. Like for me, I'm able to, an adjustment I make, and I encourage people to do, is if by the way, think about, you're fueling your body for the sort of the future, right? And so, like, if you're not going to exercise tomorrow, you're not going to exercise tomorrow, eat less today and tomorrow. That, kind of surround that kind of peri-nutrient mentality of, like, make a preparation. Like with this COVID lockdown, I hardly drive anymore. Like,
Yeah.
I am putting less fuel in my car, which is, hey, good for me. I'm spending less money on gas. But so what? Gas is a pretty good metaphor for eating, right? Gasoline is the calories that makes my car go. Food is the calories that makes my system work. So I need less of it when I'm less active. So I'm pretty good at, and I encourage people to be mindful of the way that they eat, so that you can make those adjustments on the fly.
Something you said, Dan Solomon was on the show, and he runs the Olympia. He's the new guy running the Mr. Olympia, now because it was sold.
Yeah.
And he also produced the movie Bigger, the Joe Weider movie that was on Netflix, and it was on HBO. It was really good, actually, about Joe and Ben Weider growing up. You met Joe Weider and worked with him a little, which is very cool. But I asked him, I go, would you do it again, movies? He goes, no, it's not what I do. He said, I found a producer. We were able to raise a lot of money. We were very lucky that way. He was also he was executive producer. And what he said ties into what you said. He said, Mike, I'm watching the director, and I'm watching these A-list actors, and they're at a different level than other people, not overall, but with this focal thing that they're doing. They're able to complete the last element that you were saying. Maybe there's something missing with most people. These folks have completed the deal, and that's why they operate at such a high level. Now, there's other areas, aspects of their lifestyle. So I do think, sometimes you're doing things, and let's say you're creative, you're doing a lot of different things, and you just can't close out the deal because you're missing this one element. I found that, and I thought that was a good point that you and he made. And maybe that's why people hire a guy like you, to fill, like Stallone said, you're filling in the gaps. I got gaps, you got gaps. Together we fill gaps. Maybe it's one of those things. Let me get to these questions quick. One thing Rob Thompson asked, desiccated liver tablets are still available. Are they effective? Well, in my opinion, yeah, they're effective, and they are still available. I mean, what do you think, Pete? Do you take them now or no?
Oh, shoot, Doc, I'm going to kick that one right back to you. I don't have an opinion on
Okay,
them.
Good.
Yeah, okay.
Well, we'll talk about supplements in a bit. Let's go to Lance Stranahan, good friend. I'm assuming, being at that wellness center that you were at, Pete, perhaps you know a thing or two about hormone optimization. Would Pete have an opinion on this? Let me just read it over here, because that way you're not blocked out. Suppose you have someone such as myself, and Lance is a good friend. Lance's father was a pro golfer along with Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus. He won the British Open, but Lance's father was the guy who introduced weights to the PGA Tour. So it's a very interesting story. Wow. So Lance has quite a pedigree, but he's asking here, suppose you have someone such as him, who's 57, trains hard and eats very well and is in pretty good shape. He's in very good shape. He has a high bar, so maybe he thinks it's pretty good. If your total testosterone is around 450 and free test levels around 65, and you have no major symptoms besides slightly lower libido and not much gym progress and hard to get real lean, should that someone who goes on TRT now, and it kind of trails off, but I guess he's asking about TRT and what you think about it.
I think that, and I've put a lot of thought and research into this. So here's a full disclaimer, right? I'm a guy with a liberal arts degree, but I I try harder, so
Yeah.
I'm Hertz.
Wait,
And,
as opposed to others with a liberal arts degree, not so hard, perhaps.
So
we try not to go political. I mean, I tell people, if you want to fight, go to the Middle East. Don't start throwing rocks at you. Come on, we're all together here. I just met you today, and here we are, laughing, talking, having a good time.
Yeah. So I would take, that's a thoughtful question and an increasingly common one for those of us that I say those of us that are middle aged and working out and being mindful of the way that we eat. It's like a club, and a club you want to be in, and that's men and women. And as part of being in that club of optimizing our health as we move forward, that to think about the potential of hormone replacement therapy is absolutely one that is an option that's on the table. Find yourself a qualified practitioner, somebody who specializes in that area. I've had a chance to meet and pick the brains of some of these folks here in Los Angeles that do that. I had one medical doctor that's in this field, and he said to me, I asked him, I said, I'm going to assume here that, 80-90% of your patients, because it's pretty much what he drills down. That's pretty much all he does. And 80-90% are male. He said 45% male, 55% female.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really? No kidding.
And I go, wow. So there's a lot. It goes, yeah. This hormone optimization for the way you feel, the way you look, the way that it might be reacting to your energy levels and these important things. It's a very big subject for women who are just a little bit behind the curve when rather than, as opposed to men, but they're getting the message and they're seeing great results.
Dr. Huizenga, does he deal with any of that? Does he refer people out for hormone therapy, TRT, anything like that?
I've asked him about that, and he doesn't. And he's, no, to his credit, he's expert in so many areas that he feels comfortable, but he says, you know what, I'm going to let the guys that study that all day go ahead and put their arms around that. So no, he doesn't.
Yeah, I like that. Walter Bennett, a good friend of mine, Dr. Walter Bennett, he's a big fan of yours and the NFL. He said, great stuff. Let's see if we can pop it up so everybody can see it. Great stuff. Pete, do you still talk to many of the guys you played with? And if so, is the cognitive decline among former NFL players as failing as we are led to believe?
It's a good question. I stay in touch with many guys. Some years ago, I was the local chapter president here in Los Angeles of the Retired NFL Players Association. And social media is great about helping the guys stay in touch. I participate in a Raiders alumni weekend every single year. The Raiders have the best, above all, alumni support system. They have a woman that all she does is direct a program of former NFL players, and it's been a blessing. So that's just a shout out to the Raiders organization and its owner, Mark Davis, who personally created that program beginning 5 years ago.
That's Al's son, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. And
not for nothing. I think, my opinion, the Raiders are probably one of the top 5 most storied franchises in the NFL. Would you agree? I mean, they're one of the ones that really kind of stand out, I think, for a lot of different reasons.
They are. I'll give you one quick paragraph on that. It was a real blessing to me I just played one season with the Raiders, but it was a blessing to finish this way. It wasn't until I got out of football that I began, kind of acting on my interest in the NFL. I'll give you an example. It was several years after I was out of football, I read 2 books on Al Davis. And he was just one of the most interesting people that I'd ever met in my entire life.
Really?
And I said, I need to read more about this guy. And I did. And it's absolutely amazing. One of the reasons first of all, not every team by a long shot has a Super Bowl trophy, and only a few teams have 2 and the Raiders have 3. So that puts them in rarefied air. And the other thing that really makes them so unique is that it's really all about Al Davis. It really is the Al Davis story, that he started out as a coach and then became a head coach, leveraged that, which is impossible to even think in this day, but leveraged his position as a winning head coach for a percentage of the organization. He said, yeah, I want that in my contract. I want to own 10%. He parlayed that because it was a group of owners. They don't allow groups to own teams anymore.
Oh, no kidding.
But back then they did. And
Right.
It was a group of owners. I think it was 5 or 6 families. And he actually, over the years, renegotiated his contract for a greater and ultimately the largest part of the team, establishing himself as what they call the managing general partner. Anyway, I'll leave it right there, but he's a fascinating businessman as well as a brilliant coach. And he runs wind sprints after practice when he's in his 70s.
with white bell bottoms on. Hey,
Yeah.
that's extraordinary because I didn't know all of that, but I always assumed, I probably heard that, but I assumed he had money, bought the team. But if he started as a minority owner, he had to build up. I mean, he became the majority owner, right, over time.
Yeah, he negotiated it through the years. Because he was such an effective general manager. He actually left he left. The only reason he wasn't the head coach he was only the head coach for 1 or 2 seasons. And he left because he was begged by the AFL owners to become their first commissioner and move to New York City.
Oh.
So Pete Rozelle was the commissioner of the NFL and Al Davis was the commissioner of the AFL. They knew they had a chance to all boats rise, to merge and prosper. And he was the guy that they needed to do that. After he did what he said he was going to do, he came back to Oakland, and by then he decided he didn't want to be the head coach, but he took his position as the general manager. And I think it's at that point that was another negotiating opportunity where he basically took control of the team.
How do you feel about rolling the bones at Vegas now?
I think it's long overdue. I think it's an excellent move. I'm completely bullish on that move. I think it's a perfect fit, and I think everybody wins. I'm very excited that the Raiders have their own home. They can put their flag in the ground and say, "This is our turf. We're never going to move." I think the attendance will be absolutely staggering because take it from me, a guy that played for the Chiefs, also in their same division in the AFC West, like the Chargers are and like the Broncos are. Everybody wants a chance to get, if there's an excuse to get out of the freezing winter and take a weekend in Vegas, you're going to do it. Everybody in the NFL, the Steeler fans, the whoever rotates into the schedule of the home games, the Packers fans, the Bears fans, they're all going to want tickets desperately, and then to watch the game, go see a show, roll the bones, play some poker, and see the Raiders. It's a slam dunk. And everybody wins. I love it.
So you kind of answered it, but I always thought, the toughness factor, or, the mentality. But so guys, obviously, if they can choose a more friendly, forgiving climb as opposed to playing in the tundra of Green Bay, they'd rather go where it's fair. And your body, you're probably going to last longer, right? I mean, injuries are lessened, the whole deal. That's a factor.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, that was part of the advantage I had over playing. I was actually in the league for 6 years. One of them isn't listed because I was recovering from 3 surgeries that took over a year. Jeez. But over that span of time, I played with a lot of different teammates. I saw the different cultures between the Bengals, the Chiefs, and the Raiders, and I got to know a whole lot of guys and shared stories like what's it like to play in Chicago, what's it like to play in Buffalo and in Green Bay, and share stories. Guys want to go a place. Number one, across the board, they just want to go to a place where they can win. They want more of that money. They want to win first, and then the accoutrements are second. In weather, certainly most people are pretty affected by the weather, but everybody wants to win first.
I'm so not that I'm surprised, but you live in California. I live in Connecticut, probably the 2 most expensive states, along with New York. So obviously money is important. You got to have it. Martin Luther King said it probably more eloquently than me because I'm not him, but he said, it's wonderful to do good things. Without money, it's very hard. So when you say that, guys would, maybe that's different now, do you think, with the culture where, back then they really want to win. Now they're just going where the money is. Do you think there's more of that where they don't really care about winning as much?
Boy, it's interesting, right? So, football's game is so unique because you got so many players on that team, and they've all played, different positions. You got 11 starters on offense, 11 on defense, a kicker and a punter. And that locker room is so important. It's not really talked about. I think I listen to a lot of sports talk radio and things. It's difficult. It's difficult unless you've actually spent time in the locker room of an NFL team. And it's one thing if you got like an NBA team and you got 12 guys or whatever it is, or 15 guys. When you got 53 guys, there's a lot of personalities, a lot of ego, a lot of these days, a lot of money and all that going on. But you need to get these guys on the same sheet of music, and it's no small task. Part of the genius of Bill Belichick is the way he manages people. I mean, can he do the X's and O's? Like crazy. He's good at it, but his ability to manage people is absolutely phenomenal. And I think Andy Reid has done a brilliant job at that, particularly the last 3 years with the Chiefs, because they've had some legal issues with some of the players. That doesn't make it fun or interesting for anybody. It just makes it harder, especially for the coaching staff who's trying to solve the problems and, the potential internal conflict. I know one thing that isn't talked about is maybe a little insider stuff on the Chiefs, but the way Andy Reid runs things, and I'm sure other teams do, is he has a circle of influence guys. He's got a handful of guys that are, I believe, chosen by him, and it might be a vote. I'm not really sure.
Are they you're talking about players?
That are players that he has meetings with where he can have a conversation, and the messaging and exchange between his inner circle of team leaders, and then those players can disseminate that information as they see fit to the troops. So that's a popular tactic, that goes on. I don't know exactly who all does that. My understanding is that that's part of what is an ingredient of Andy Reid's culture. And I think there's something brilliant about it. He's had an exceptional relationship with his players for a long, long time, and he knows what it takes to win. So that, to me, that's fascinating. And the messaging, just the takeaway from that is anybody that's out there that works for a big company or manages a group of people, the lessons that I think there's some lessons to be learned by the guys at the very top of the coaching profession in the National Football League. It's
let me ask you,
challenging environment.
We talked about that missing element, A-list. We kind of alluded to that with CEOs and people like that and the producers for the movie. You mentioned Belichick. Because whenever you're winning, I mean, I live around. They're pretty much a local team for Connecticut.
Yeah.
I think they're great, but there's a lot of disparagement of them because they win. But do you think he has a little something different than others? And it's not just the players and the talent. I mean, he really does have some extra element that he employs to get these guys to rise.
I think there is. I've got a friend who played for him. My buddy Heath banged around the NFL for about 10 years and won a Super Bowl with the Saints. And then he was actually, this is how the business goes. A couple of years later, he was traded to the Patriots. And he told me that, I think he played on 5 teams. And he told me that he learned more about football and leadership in one season with Bill Belichick than he had learned in the other 9.
No kidding.
That's just one. I know that's a small sample study, but there's a lot of talk like that. I'll give you one quick story. I was part of a very, very long story short, but I was part of a project, the business thing that didn't go anywhere. But I had the opportunity about 9 years ago to meet the strength and conditioning coach for the Detroit. Where was I? The Detroit Lions, and it was the off season, and I was invited into the facility, and I'm looking at this multi-million-dollar weight room, and I know the Lions aren't a very good team from a wins and losses standpoint, but they have an amazing facility. And it's the middle of it's the spring, and it's during the day, and there's a half a dozen players here working out, and there's a 2-level. There's like a running court with some exercise bikes on the upper level, and I look like this, and I'm like, that's Bill Belichick.
You were in there.
Yeah. and I mentioned it to a buddy of mine who's one of those NFL insider guys that you see on TV. And I'm like,
right.
guess what I saw? And make a long story short was some NFL coaches make deals with their opponent as it turns out, if you looked at the schedule for the forthcoming season that year, the Patriots were going to play the Lions. They don't normally play each other. It's an interconference game or interconference game.
Right.
And so apparently what they had done, what I learned, was that they had an agreement that you can spend a day at our facility and we get to spend a day in your facility.
No kidding.
And I don't think any of that is kosher with the NFL. But
really?
No,
wow.
I don't think so. But what do I know? I'm just a guy that was standing out. I look up and see Bill Belichick.
Yeah. What it takes to win. Let's go to a couple of questions here. Robert Thompson again, and this is a good question for you, Swede. Can I call you Swede sometimes?
Yeah, it's fine.
Because as a chiropractor, I like to keep my neck, head attached to my neck, and we're going to get to that. We're going to talk about that stuff. You guys are getting good info here. Robert Thompson, I am 65. What ratio of strength training versus endurance? And it's interesting because Swede has a good endurance type of training. HLT versus longer and slower. I don't know what HLT is, but in any event, what ratio?
I think he meant HIT. I think he means HIT. High intensity training is what I guess he's going for. And, if you follow this stuff, they've been in the news lately. CrossFit as a company, it's imploded. But I'm amongst my number of certifications. I'm a CrossFit level 1 coach. I owned a CrossFit gym for 2 years.
Okay.
I understand a lot about CrossFit, and I understand the culture, and I also understand what goes into the programming. And one thing they should know up front is the CrossFit, the programming of that work that happens in the individual gyms, or what they call boxes, is individual to that coach, that person that runs it, or who's the manager or the programmer in that box. So nobody tells you what to do. It's not that nobody's on it. It's the opposite of being on the same sheet of music. Everyone's doing their own programming. And
so are you saying that's good or bad though?
I'm saying it's like the Wild West. So you could live in a town and it has 2 CrossFit boxes, a mile or a few miles apart, and you could. And I would say, and people
say, I'm sorry. By the way, he meant HIT, HIT. That's what he meant by
the high intensity training. And the HIT training. I mean, HIT and a lot of these CrossFit workouts. There's a lot of connection. So and just for the uninitiated, it goes like this. If you consider I think the majority of your audience is really familiar with bodybuilding training, and so there's you're putting the muscles, you're doing that exercise, whatever that is. That's an overhead press, that's a bicep curl. You're doing that exercise, then and the way it works is you're gonna rest that muscle, and then you're gonna repeat that. You're gonna rest it for 60 or 90 seconds, and then you'll repeat that, and then you'll finish your criteria of 4 sets of 12 or whatever it is. So there's the exercise, and those other things. How many sets? We could consider the tempo. Maybe some you want to do faster, some slower. The amount of rest time you take in between the sets. And by the way, how often should I train my biceps? I would call that the recovery time. Okay, maybe rest them 4 days. I don't know, every 4 days. Those collectively, and there's more, but those are called acute exercise variables. So you choose an exercise, and then you attach the desired the acute exercise variables that you think are best to elicit the desired result. Is your result looking to be to win a powerlifting competition or bodybuilding competition? Okay, so that's just a quick overview, because I'm going to take that information, and then you take that sort of thinking and you add it to a CrossFit exercise, and it could be some exercises that you're very relatable to as a bodybuilder, and it could be a deadlift, for example. We're going to have somebody do a deadlift for 10 repetitions, but then here's the thing: right away, they're going to walk over and they're going to do 10 pull-ups. And then right away, they're going to run outside, and they're going to run to the end of the parking lot and back. And that's 200 meters to run that loop like that. And we'll call that 1 round. Okay. So you've done deadlifts, you've done pull-ups, and then you ran 200 meters. And guess what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to say, we want you to do that circuit 6 times.
Oof.
Okay. I didn't say any rest time. I didn't say take any time off. This is a typical example of what they call in CrossFit a WOD, which is a workout of the day. That's all that stands for.
Right. Yep.
A workout of the day, and that could be one. And then so you're going to put every one of these boxes has a clock on the wall. And so say we got 14 people in a room together. So everybody sets up. The men are using a different weight than the women, or the expert level, or using more weight than the beginner guys, whatever. So everyone gets their barbell set up. Some people can't do 10 pull-ups. They might do 2 or have a big, thick band to help them do push-ups, right? So we want to make this practical, scalable to everybody, regardless of their level of fitness. And some people can run 200 meters in 40 seconds. Another person, it's going to take them 1 minute, 40 seconds. But here's the thing. Everyone's going to try their best to do those 5 rounds and stop when you need to stop, or get it, whatever you need to do. And at the end, look at the clock and see what your time is and record that. Now, just for an example, just to follow this example through to its logical end, let's say a person comes into the gym and the first time they do this workout, it takes them 12 minutes and 42 seconds, and they are drenched and they're exhausted. And they did it in 12 minutes and 42 seconds. Can we agree that if you keep showing up to that gym all the time on a regular basis, be mindful of what you're eating, you're a newbie to this, you're a beginner and you're out of shape, 12 minutes and 42 seconds, that if we revisit that workout 6 weeks later, that you can turn that 12 minutes and 42 seconds into maybe 10 minutes and 18 seconds. Can we agree that you've gotten in better shape?
Oh, yeah.
That's CrossFit.
That'd be invariable. And I think it is. A lot of it's predicated by time improvements, correct?
Yes. I'm sorry. I got off the path. But
it's okay.
That is certainly, but I think it's an important thing to understand. And then when you talk about HIIT training, that 3 exercise little thing I just thought of off the top of my head, we could definitely call that HIIT training, and we could do it different ways. How about you do the 3 exercises and then you take a minute to recover, and then you repeat that again for 5 rounds? I have no problem with that. It's just a different methodology. When you don't give people any time to stop, everything gets slower and slower and slower, and the incidence of injury goes up and up and up.
Oh, yeah.
So we can take that, but we can take that sort of roughly the programming I'm discussing, and we can apply that. We can modify that with a minute or 90-second or 2-minute rest period in between the rounds, and keep the people a bit safer, etc. But I just wanted to give you an example. And by the way, how much steady state endurance should a person that's 60-something, 8 years old, or I don't care if you're 64 or what that gentleman's age, or 24. I think for general fitness, I think if you're not trying to run a marathon and you're not, or at the other end of the spectrum, you're not trying to win a powerlifting competition, by and large, I would probably, to put a number on it, I would say 80 to 90% of what you're doing should be strength training, and the rest cardiovascular training. Here's the caveat to that, because I'm going to hedge my bet. I do like to do a certain amount of strength training that has a very specific and sort of elongated intensity to it. And that would be, I do put together things. I could do something very, very simple even with very limited equipment. I could put a weighted vest on. I could do push-ups to failure. I could grab a couple of dumbbells, tip over, bend over at the hinge at the waist, and I could get 20 repetitions of those dumbbells. Now my heart's coming through my roof, and then I could walk lunge with my 20-pound weighted vest, the length of a basketball court and back. I'll give myself a minute recovery, 5 rounds. Guess what I'm doing? I'm combining some serious strength training with some serious cardiovascular activity. These are not mutually distinct. Everybody wants to take those and put them in 2 totally separate buckets.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm either going to deadlift or I'm going to jog. There's actually a place in between.
You can work them in there. I love that, man. Talking to you, I want to go work out now, but my gym's not open until Wednesday. So unlike you, I've become quite soft. But you can't get into shape unless you're out of shape. I'm sure you heard that. It's kind of stale. Got another question. But my Dr. Bennett, once again, Pete, was it Hollywood injuries or other reasons that you retired from the NFL?
That's definitely injuries. Yeah. And It was
you had to be in your 20s when you retired. You were still in your late 20s?
So I was like 28, but as odd, as crazy as it is, with the average career length being about 3.5 years, for me to go 6 was, pretty good. So, I had such problems with my back, and I don't think I ever got the right diet. I think my back slowed me down, my mobility down. I had my wrist fused together, which it wasn't enough to stop me, but it was slowing me down. I had knee surgery, and
Pete, let me interject. I want to offer this. I won't even pose it as a question because you could answer it or not answer it, but whatever you feel comfortable with. Was there the specter of, like, you're playing and you're injured and you got to get a surgery? Was there the specter of the powers that be kind of coercing you to get back to play no matter what, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, that was part of it. That wasn't something that got me out of the game, but that was about managing my career better, and I had no guidance. So when I broke my wrist badly, I should have just shut it down and had the surgery. But I didn't. I played along, and 3 games later, I blew my knee out, and that finished the season. But I never really recovered from that moment in time. I think that should I had maybe a mentor or just the self-confidence to say, listen, I broke something that needs to be surgically fixed. I don't want to proceed as a lesser, but there's the pressure to keep on playing is phenomenal. I got that.
You're among the. I've always said this. Anyone, I've had some really great. It's great talking to you because every day it's part of my business. I get to talk to people that I've read about in magazines as a kid. So you're getting. It's really fun and it's great, and the people are so kind and giving. And I found people who are really successful often want to help people who are coming up. So I thank you. Yeah. But you were in all of that, and you were among the best, and the pressure is there. And then you finally made the decision because, frankly, you got, like, I was joking, maybe not joking, but we were talking a lot about you this week. And I said, we've got Poseidon coming. He has the best hair in the world. He can go through a cyclone. It's like he's not even touched. And, we're saying in a good way. But, you've got this look. So you're playing football. You're really lean because a lot of guys aren't, they're big, but they don't really have that look. So was there, you segued into acting. I'm sure it wasn't easy. You took classes, or did somebody say, hey, I think, I think about Terry Crews, who you probably know him. And look what he's done, with, long career in the NFL, I think. And, now he's like one of the top guys, right?
Oh, he's done great. I've met him. I don't pretend to know him, but he's done great. And when I read about Terry, I was very impressed and not surprised that he was a theater major in college.
Was he? I didn't know that. Huh.
Yeah. So wow. He had a vision. Yes. I didn't. I was an afterthought to me. I was introduced to acting by a friend of mine from New York. He was.
So wait, when you were getting jacked, you're around my age, just a year or two more, but you knew who Lou Ferrigno was. And frankly, I've been in bodybuilding for many years. 300 contests, either competing, promoting, judging, emceeing, the whole thing. So I've seen everything around here anyhow. Generally, you don't get guys who look like you who have such height. So you got that. And it would ordinarily, with somebody, you might tell them, hey, you're looking at the Hulk as a young kid, and you're like, man, I could do something like that. But even still, you only thought about football. You never really thought about going beyond that.
Yeah, I certainly watched the Hulk as a kid, and I liked movies a lot, and I couldn't get my head around how the process worked until somebody who was a friend from Rab's gym on Long Island in Lynbrook, where I worked out as a high school kid. My buddy Perry, about 10 years older than me, and he had a full-time job, but he was doing plays and making commercials from time to time in New York City. And he had wanted to move to Hollywood to really pursue the dream at that level. And when he moved, I had just finished my first season in the NFL. And he said, hey, I'm living in LA. You got to come out and check this out. It's going great. I got this acting thing. I got it going. I got an agent. And when I got out, he says, what are you going to do with yourself in the off season? I said, I'm going to stay in shape. And he said, well, you got time, right? You should get into this business. You got a unique look. And that's how it got me started. It was somebody that could show me the ropes.
Well, that's good. That's cool. So you were able to, obviously had something to do and somewhere to go right afterward. So tell us, you had the 3 big movies that are the most prominent: Loverboy, Heartbreak Ridge. I'm sorry, what was the third? I had it in front of me here. You've done a lot on TV. You've done, I think you've done commercials and things like that. I mean, you're still active. But when did Heartbreak Ridge come up? Was that like a big competitive cattle call? Were they even looking for like a big guy to play Swede?
Yeah. The script read 6'7", 280 pounds.
Oh,
pretty
so
close.
They were looking for you. Yeah. By the way, I want to mention your playing weight was, from what I read when we talked about it, 275 to 280. Today you're 240. But they want, you were 300 in Heartbreak Ridge.
Yeah.
Very, very, in very good shape too. It's, carrying that's muscle. That's not like, just eating.
Yeah. That was an off season in between a couple seasons in Kansas City. And I was very fortunate.
So you filmed that while you were playing in the NFL?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Wow.
I had an agent, and he says, I got an audition for you. It's you gotta drive onto the Warner Brothers lot. It's for a movie, and that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And you're not saying who's the star of the movie or anything, or even the name of the movie, but here's the role. Looks like you play a Marine.
Wait, let me stop you. I'm sorry. So he knew, but he didn't want to tell you? Is that how it worked?
No, he didn't know.
Okay.
So this is fairly common practice that a big movie with a big star, they keep that private so that nobody makes any noise about these auditions or tries to get in the audition when they're not invited.
Right.
So I had the audition material, which is typically 3, 4, 5 pages of the script. The scene that you're in, we call them sides. So I had the sides, and I rehearsed for a day, and then I went to my audition, and I got.
Hey, Pete, hold on. Tell us what that's like. Maybe if there's nerves involved, compare that to playing in an NFL game to going to audition in front of these big. Is there a difference between the mindset and the the hopefulness or lack thereof?
Oh my God, it's so. They're both nerve-wracking, but in one is so.
Wait, is there adrenaline involved or anything like that? I mean, you're not depressed.
No,
push down. You've got to kind of rise, right? Or
right.
energy.
So yeah, I mean, if the audition scenes calls for you to be some raving lunatic, you have to bring that energy, right?
Oh,
so you've got to kind of get in that headspace, and. But this scene didn't, but it's but the energy that bottled up energy as an actor, that nervousness, I try to get my arms around the nervousness that I feel and tell myself that and this is good advice for an athlete too, is that nervousness is only there because I care so damn much. And that's a good thing. And if I didn't care, I'd be out with her.
Are you like that with everything? In other words, anything you ingrain yourself in or you pursue, it's an extension of you, so it has to be, beyond the pale.
Yeah, I think in fact, my battle my whole life has been anxiety. So I tend to be buzzing all the time. It's better now. God, it only took me 58 years to have less anxiety.
Yeah,
but I had a lot of anxiety through my entire life. It was something that I had to battle. I was never the guy. Like honestly, like I got this. It's like my little pet peeve. But pep talks from coaches are BS. Because
are you saying for you or in general?
For me, 100% nonsense. If you, I find it. I gotta relax myself because I feel indignant that you think you gotta hype me. You think you gotta hype me? Don't you know who I am?
You're scaring me, man.
Right. So I don't, but there's more relaxed guys that are like, oh yeah, that's good, good. I just never ever wired that way.
Hey Pete,
I mean, I got a hype man in my head that will kick your ass 24/7.
I love it. I have a parallel for you here. I was watching, it was in some movie, and there was a quarterback in the locker room. He used to be the starter. They replaced him, and he was really pissed off. The coach comes in. Tell me if this is similar. The coach comes in, and the guy is like, I work so hard, I work so hard, I work so hard. So the coach goes, what are you talking about? You're making 8 million or whatever number. You're supposed to work. You're not doing extra with the hard work, in other words, right? So why would they have to hype you up? That's kind of what I'm saying. Isn't that true?
I think it's a great point, but the reason they do it, but by the way, make no mistake about it. There's a couple different things going on, but when you get, I'll talk at the D1 level and even the NFL level, is not every head coach is a hype man guy. They're not. It varies. And believe it or not, some head coaches, at least it was my experience because I saw it, they'll leave the hype talk to an assistant coach.
Really?
Like, take it over, dude. Like, they're great at it, and that's not their thing. And that's cool. Like, that's a part of a delegation of responsibility. I think that's cool.
Well, it's like you're in business, and like I run businesses, and I've learned, and you learn this, and if you don't, you're always gonna have anxiety and squirm. That don't try to master what you're not really good at. Just find other people to do it. Just don't waste your time, right? I mean, is that kind of what you're saying?
Real.
Yeah.
Yeah, for real. But that's part of you're right. But whether the nature or the magnitude or the volume of that pep talk is all a part of the culture that the head coach brings. And anyway, that's my dissertation. I got this little pet peeve about pep talks because I've just always been so internal. I've had that natural, God-given, I guess, internal drive. I actually needed the guy. I needed somebody to say, chill, whoa, Pete, be cool, like to take me down when I got on the field. Yeah. So you got to find, look, if you're too low, obviously you're going to get blown off the ball. If you're too high, you're not going to have full mastery of either cognitive, physically, you just won't have that mastery. You need to be smooth and coordinated and efficient with your motion. And from a cognition standpoint, people have no idea that the last minute adjustments that you're making, that you're responding from the linebacker calling signals to you right before the ball is snapped. You need to be clear-headed, thinking on point.
I would imagine there's probably plenty of guys, because I think about that and I watch sometimes, and just the dynamics that you have to understand, and they're quickly changing. So I would imagine there may be a lot of guys who have the physical tools that you do, but they don't have the mental capacity to make those changes or understand, and therefore they can't play. And then you wonder, and that's why some guys maybe don't make it, and you wonder why they disappear so quickly. Could that be?
I mean, football is a damn near. I say golf is probably the perfect example, but football is a pretty perfect meritocracy. And you play this game. It takes years to work your way through the levels of youth football to high school to college. If you think you got a shot at the NFL, and then a lot of people get the hell of an awakening when they get into an NFL training camp. There's so many things so many things you've got to do right, and given so many opportunities to screw things up. The mental part of your game, the physical part of your game, your quickness, your strength, your toughness, your resiliency. You will be tested on so many single levels that most simply don't make it. But those people get, kicked out of the program to make it to the NFL at all those. Everybody's got their place where they're going to get off the train at a certain point, and it's always based on the totality of the merit that you bring.
What was the attitude or the reaction to your teammates when you started acting and then you came back that season? Was it supportive? They bust your balls, joke around?
It was so great. It was 100% positive. So Heartbreak Ridge came out in December. Somebody's going to look it up. It was either October.
Somebody please look up. Somebody go to Wikipedia, look up Heartbreak Ridge, and give us the specs on when it.
IMDb website will tell you.
Oh, okay, right. IMDb.
But right. I think it was released in November, and so here it is, right in the middle of the season with the Kansas City Chiefs.
And the movie did well, right? It was a hit.
It was a hit movie, and there was a head page, front page on the sports section.
Wow.
And the article about me was nice.
You're already rocking it in the NFL. I mean, you're in the apex of that profession. And all of a sudden, you're like one of the main, most outstanding characters. And I'm not patronizing you because it's a fact. You were one of, people still, we're talking about it decades later right now. So It was impactful. So you had those two things going. I mean, things were really rolling for you, right?
Yeah, it was pretty good. And I was a little bit concerned about the reaction of my teammates. And I hadn't talked about it. Like, who wants to hear a guy in the locker room say, "Hey, I made this movie last summer," whatever. But then the movie came out and it was real, and everybody was supportive. It was great. It was a good time.
Tell us about what happens in that scene with Michael Bradford, December 5th, 1986, Heartbreak Ridge. So there you go. I guess it was the premiere, December 5th. Because when they premiere it, Pete, isn't it like in a small focal area and then it's a wide release? Isn't that what they do with the movies?
Right. I was invited to the premiere, but I couldn't attend that. That was in Hollywood. Yeah, that was in Hollywood. So that was the general release, December 15th. Yeah, that's what it was.
Well, tell us about the scene, though, because it's a great, especially somebody was remarking upon how all the little skinny guys after you got knocked out, how they all of a sudden towed the line and ran outside. But did you have to, with Clint, and you had a relationship with Clint, and you could talk about that, but just start with this one pointed where he, lift your chin up a little bit more, and you're like kind of grimacing. Did he really, because I know with Stallone, they really trade punches. Now, did he really hit you, or how did that go down?
He didn't hit me. We did of him throwing the punch. That angle, right? So you do multiple angles, right, to cover this. Not really tricky business, but you do want to make it look cool. And with the camera here and his punch going that way, we did 2 takes, and I got that head going the right way. Got it right. I think we got it right, and it looks good. It looks like a hit.
Oh yeah.
And but I think what was really a critical moment. God bless. Mario Van Peebles, the actor that played Stitch Jones in that film. He's very successful, mostly continues to act, but also he's a director. And Mario Van Peebles was already very successful at the time we made that film. He was a little bit older than the rest of us in that group, and he grew up in the business. His father was a filmmaker, Melvin Van Peebles, and when it came to that scene, Mario was really already quite experienced and had sold screenplays and been in a lot of things. And he said he saw the rehearsal, right? We're all in that room and the rehearsal. So the camera was just like this, like the height of my eyes. And I come in, and Clint directed the movie, and he says, action, or this is probably the first AD. He says, okay, let's rehearse this, action. And I go from outside and I come in and I hit my mark, and they measured, and they gave me a mark to stand, and they measured the focal length so that I'll be in focus. And Clint looks at it and goes, "Oh, that looks good. All right, let's do it. Right. Shoot it. Let's go." And Mario says, "Hey, Clint, can I say something?" Which is highly unusual, And he said, "I had this idea, just had an idea." He goes, "What do you got?" And Clint says, "What do you got?" And he says, "If we did this, imagine this. If we just set the camera here, down here, and then Pete comes in, and then we pan up, like we go up and just track him, and like we see this reveal. Look at his legs. Look at the guy."
Yeah, I was watching that.
Yeah, and Clint goes, "That sounds like a good idea. And let's take a look at that." And he talks to the director of photography, and they got to do an adjustment. They got to put the thing on the camera on.
Was that meant to accentuate your size? And
yes. And then Clint goes, "Let's rehearse this thing again." And so I go out, come back in, I hit the mark, and then boom, boom, there. And that's like the iconic shot. That's what we call in the business of the reveal.
The reveal.
And I think it put all the it poured the gas on the scene, because it just made my character so much more interesting for what's going to happen next. And there's a little bit of exchange. I'm going to rip your head off and shit down your neck. And get in line or whatever the hell he said to me, and then the punch, and then the fallout. When it scrambles, the fallout. I'll wait for the MPs to take me to the ring. That's all gravy. But the way the camera worked on that scene, and it made the movie better, made me better, and that's Mario Van Peebles' input to an open-minded genius, by the way, named Clint Eastwood.
Would you say that was kind of like a watershed moment, perhaps even life-changing to a certain extent for you, that one scene right there, the movie itself?
It was, because here's what I couldn't have anticipated. I knew that I was working with one of the biggest movie stars in the world, but
yes.
nobody could have thought that Clint Eastwood, that anybody would stay so absolutely important and vital and productive until he's 90 now.
Just turned 90, right?
Just turned 90.
Yeah.
Nobody has that staying power. No, Clint Eastwood is, I think he's just kind of moved past John Wayne, and like Cary Grant as the biggest movie star in history because of the totality and the length of his work. Nobody could have anticipated he makes, I believe he makes, if not 2 films a year, 1.5. So like 3 films every 2 years. It's unbelievably productive. He's prolific, and he's absolutely brilliant. And so nobody could have anticipated that. The one other thing is that the military has gotten behind this movie in such a way. I think they're the motor that keeps it rerunning as much as it does, and it's a staple around the world, but most importantly in the United States on Veterans Day, Memorial Day.
That's great.
Independence Day, these holidays, and it just doesn't stop, and that's been a blessing for me.
Well, you got a fan in Chef Andre Rush. I had him on the other day.
Great.
Big. He was in the service 23 years, and he does a lot with vets and whatnot. To go back to that for a second, getting back to Clint, I know he's trained with Frank Zane, and he trained a lot, and he seemed like was he in good shape? Did you talk to him about training then? What was he doing? A lot of weights, or was his food a certain way? I mean, he looked like he was maybe 180, which is pretty big for, because I know, you look a lot.
He weighed 215 in Heartbreak Ridge.
Did he? Wow.
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, he's 6'4".
Okay, well, I didn't know he was that tall. No kidding. Wow.
So I want to say it was 220. And so he says to me one day, we're at shooting in Camp Pendleton. It was supposed to be Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, but we shot this thing at Pendleton in San Diego. And he says to me, "Hey, you want to go get a workout?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Look, like these one of these colonels set me up at the one of these Quonset huts here is like got a gym inside, and he's got it set up for us. Like we can just take it. And you want to go?" He goes, "Yeah, some of these guys will help us get over there." I said, "Yeah, let's go." And then Mario Van Peebles is standing there because I was just talking with him at this time. It was at the end of a work day, and Mario goes, "Can I get in on this?" And Clint goes, "Yeah, sure, come on." And we jump in. Clint had a pickup truck, and we just jump in. I'll drive, and we drive over. We bomb down this road and drive over there. And he says, "What do you want to start with?" I said, "Oh, I don't know. I usually probably bench press today." He goes, "Let's do it." And that began our conversation. He was strong. He had a lot of information. He was picking my brain about how many days a week, how many times a week should I, this and that. And also very interested in nutrition. And he was way ahead of me on nutrition. I mean, I'm like, I don't think I know that much as you do. And I said, well, "What's your feeling on nutrition?" And he goes, "I'm really big on supplements. I think that we can all benefit from supplementation." And then we kind of went down that road, but he was really dialed in. He looked great.
Down to earth guy, could talk to him, felt comfortable around
him. Down to earth. He was 55 when he made that movie, right? So you're 56, I'm 50.
Yeah, our age pretty much. Wow.
Yeah, he was in great shape. It was absolutely a lifer when it came to physical fitness. And he was another night, he says to me, when we shot the part of the movie that was supposed to be Grenada, there was a battle of and we sort of rescued these kids that were in a medical school. Anyway, We actually shot that not in Grenada, but we shot it on the island of Vieques, which is off the coast of Puerto Rico. And so we flew there. We spent a week there. And one night, he says, after we were done shooting, he goes, "What are you doing for dinner?" I don't really have a plan. You know, I'm just an actor over here by myself, you know. And he's like, "What you want? Let's go get some dinner. You want to get dinner?" I said, "Yeah." So just me and him.
Wow.
He had a car. We drive. Walks in. It's just so crazy when you're around somebody that's so famous. And just to make it even a little more weird, is you're you're on a remote island you know what I mean, in the Caribbean. Yeah. And it was like an upscale seafood restaurant. It's kind of a touristy, but it's still a very small town. And every buddy just looked like this. It was a restaurant with people in it from all over the world, really. And people came by, people were polite, and he was always gracious. I mean, there is definitely a real downside to being that famous. I mean, I got a good look at it. I saw the love, and I saw both sides of it. It's amazing. And he was gracious the entire time.
When you're in that moment there with him, do you kind of go back in your mind? Like I was talking to Rich Gaspari, bodybuilder, you probably remember him. And
sure.
He said his first pro show, he was standing there, and he did really well, really young. He came in second in his first pro show, but he's standing next to one of the guys you read about in the magazines, the guy I hired several times for guest posing. He's standing with Robbie Robinson, and posing down. He ended up beating him, which is even more amazing, but he just couldn't. He was tripping out on the stage, just like, in this moment. And even with you, here you are. Do you think back to when you started training and you didn't even know you were going to be there? Maybe you played football and you didn't even know you're going to gain weight. The coach told you got to gain 100 pounds. If not, you're going to be an accountant, which nothing against accountants. I've got a couple on here. And when you're with them, does that go through your head? In other words, do you know you're in that moment and do you relish it and you capture it?
Yeah, I probably had a pretty good on-ramp because by then I was already playing in the NFL. But, it became very clear to me that NFL fame and biggest movie star in the world fame are like on two separate planets.
They are.
Okay. And I just had a 2-hour dinner of lobster with in conversation and a little bit of wine with just mind blown, but I wasn't freaked out because I'd been around, but I was really more the emotion more than anything because I was so fortunate because of the intimacy with Clint I was just very flattered and humbled.
Have you run into him in ensuing years at all or ever talked to him or see him?
Twice, but it's been 20 years. But both times, believe me, first thing I do is say, "Hey, I'm Pete Koch. I had this little role in this movie. I was the Swede for you, Pete. Of course,
well, how can you forget?
Of course, I remember. I don't ever want to make him uncomfortable by not remembering me.
Yeah, no, right.
But he's always been gracious. The last time was about 20 years ago. Yeah.
Here's another interesting thing. When you were, around this time, maybe a little bit after, Joe Weider scooped you up, and you were able to work with Joe Weider, which that was a guy I always wanted to meet. I never did. Him and Jack LaLanne. But so what did he do with you? I mean, he liked you, and he did some stuff with you, right?
I was introduced to Joe in the old Weider office building in Woodland Hills, its prime in its heyday in the late 80s. I was introduced by Fred Hatfield, Dr. Squat, the champion powerlifter, who's a mentor.
From here, from Connecticut. I've interviewed him. Yeah, God rest in peace, unfortunately.
God bless, beautiful man. And he was Joe Weider's science editor for all the magazine publications at that time.
Very smart.
He introduced me, and I was training with Fred. And at
that time,
wow. I was Fred's training partner when he squatted 1,003 pounds.
Really? Wow. Yeah. One little side note, when I interviewed him, he was a little acerbic, and understandably so, because people to this day, they'll compare his record with what guys do now, and he would just get incredulous. You know, I didn't use a suit. We didn't even, you know, the lifting suit and the, you know, the implements they use to help them. He says mine was totally raw, and you know, respect, because I think that means something, you know.
Yeah, it's you know, they over the powerlifting is, you know, sort of move the goal, you know, move the bar around a little bit with the equipment, and it kind of I think it mucked up the sport myself. I won't buy it, because I saw Fred, like I spotted Fred 2 weeks out from the World Championships. We had 5 guys. But you listen, when you put 950 pounds on a bar, you better have some strong people there. And I was the tallest guy, and the guy behind him, I squatted him when I saw him do a 950-pound triple ass to grass, and all he had on was a jock strap, a pair of basketball gym shorts, single ply knee wraps, a t-shirt, and a belt. That was his equipment. That was it. It was a hot day in the San Fernando Valley, and I thought he was going to die when he got done. And the first thing he did when he finished, by the way, is he sat down on a belt. We took 2 of us to cinch the belt off of him, and then one guy was relieving him of the bands on his knees. He was sweating profusely. The capillaries in his eyes had blown out. They were red. Wow. And he was so exhausted he couldn't breathe properly. He reached behind and he grabbed the Marlboro Red and said, "Where's my matches?"
Really? That's the first thing he did?
Yeah, a cigarette.
Not something we'd advocate. It worked for him.
He was hard, man. He was kind of a hard dude, you know.
But you met him through Weider, and Joe had you in some ads.
Oh yeah, so I met Joe. He walks.
Hey, listen. First of all, I know that wasn't as lucrative as the NFL and probably even Heartbreak Ridge, right?
Not at all.
Joe,
Joe, I think
I'll mention quickly. I've interviewed, probably had on my podcast and other things that I've written, I don't know, maybe 100 bodybuilders of the IFBB level, pro level, you know, national caliber. Not one has really spoken, you know, you'll hear some bad things about Joe, but the people who knew him, they all speak well of him, but they do say one thing. Like back in the day, if you went on the cover, he would only pay you $50. And some guys would kind of balk. And you know what he'd tell him? He goes, "Look, I got a line of guys that'll go on for free." So that's how it was. And I know he paid you what?
Oh, I was featured in an ad for protein powder, and I did a separate photo shoot for that. And he ran that unlimited at his discretion, and I made $250. Oh,
it was $250. Okay.
Yeah, a little money.
That's how it was.
I think. Yeah. Anyway, so here's my story, and but when I went, so here, I don't know if you ever heard this, but this was kind of cool. So Joe had the top floor, the Don's, you know, as he should have, you know, was his office space, and when you went in, it was his private office. So check this out. I've never seen this before. He had 2 secretaries. Each one of them had their desks were facing each other, and then Joe was here in the middle. He had the biggest desk I've ever seen, and these secretaries had giant desks.
Really?
Covered. All of them, all 3 desks were covered with materials, and those typewriter days or word processor, right? More so.
The Royal.
And just files and pictures and the amount of stuff going. I mean, phones, several different phone line. Their phones are ringing. The secretaries are going like this.
Incidentally, wasn't the room festooned with all kinds of beautiful art from all over the world too?
Exactly. It was. I said, this is what a CEO's office looks like. He's a don. It was beautiful. And he took a minute. He stood up, you know, and he was busy, and you know, and he came around and shook my hand and says, "Hey, you know, Fred tells me good things about you. Tell me all about yourself."
That's not bad, but I got about 3 pros who you would think you were talking to Weider.
You can't get really crazy. I'm looking at your physique right now, and I'm thinking you look actually, you're a little bulging. You're looking like good job on you.
Hey, Pete, what were the biggest? Because Weider loves big arms. You know, he'll promote you if you got. I mean, Did he look at you and say, "What are you playing football for? We got to get you on stage"? Nothing like
No,
that.
Fred told me that you play football. That's good, but good. You're on a good body anyway. You can be a bodybuilder.
Yeah,
Like that. Okay, thanks, Joe. I appreciate that.
What what, your takeaway from him? Did you learn anything about business, or did he,
Oh, it was all a minute, and I was out the door. But well, here's what my takeaway message was: this guy is busy, and he took a minute out of the day, came over, shook my hand, looked me in the eye. We had a pleasant exchange, and I said, "Thank you for your time."
Yeah, that's hey, just like I'm thanking you and anybody who, because you're disseminating very, very valuable information. We appreciate it. So, you talked about injuries and things like that. You've healed to a certain degree. Maybe you have to do things a little differently. Oh, here we go. My good friend Skip Robinson, who's a bodybuilding icon from up here in the Northeast, and I think Skip's in his 60s, but big time 70. You trained with Arnold, won the Mr. World. He's going to be on Friday. Great interview. Pete is a great example of longevity. Keep up the good work, both of you. Well, no, I'm just an appendage here, Skip. We're going to have you on Friday. But no, we love guys I'm happy guys like Pete Koch are out there. No, because he's got a lot of fame, but he doesn't just ride on that. He's still working really. Pete, would you agree? Anybody who rises to a high level, Weider, anybody like that, they continue to work hard. It's not like you're Mr. Peanut with a top hat, kicking back, smoking a cigar, watching the traffic go by, right? You're like you're still, to stay in that shape. Do you get this from people? Well, that's how you are, genetics, I'm imagining you still are on point with everything, right?
Yeah. I mean, I said this earlier that I've always felt a little bit insecure the fact that I don't have a degree in exercise science or nutrition, but I try harder. That just puts that little bit of insecurity, but I make that work for me and say there's nothing in the world preventing me from reading all the time. There's I'm not worried about. I don't need any more television before I die, but I do need to continue to read to maintain my credibility. The world is evolving at such a rapid pace that if somebody puts a good question in front of me regarding that broad. I tell people I'm a proud generalist when it comes to physical fitness. I can talk about it. Everything from my powerlifting experience as we've already covered, and I appreciate you kind of taking me through all these broad spectrum of my experience.
Everything you've done has led to who you are today. It's all important.
Right. And so that, and it's important to me to be, we live in a world of specialization. We really do, because now strength and conditioning coaches, they specialize. Like if your daughter, who is between 12 and 14 years old, is a promising high jumper, she should train with this coach because he's an expert on plyometrics and the periodization. It's also specialized. Here I am, and I'm proudly a generalist to speak to people as of any age, because I've been that age and I'm at this age now, and I also know what's going to take between now and the end of things to keep you looking, moving, and feeling the best you possibly can. Those principles are unwavering. Methodologies are evolving.
Those three things, you almost read my mind. Looking, feeling, and functioning to the best you can. Is that what
look, move, and feel?
Okay, looking, moving, and feeling the best you can. And where you're at right now, juxtapose that with what you did on the daily 30 years ago, and have you leveraged much that you have learned over the years to be better? In other words, if you knew back then what you know now, would have you been a better athlete, better physique, better longevity, felt better, not as injured?
Yeah. Now, if I go back in a time machine, I would have handled my training differently. But I think so many pro athletes would. I would have put just a greater emphasis on mobility than abject strength. I would leave it at that. But those are two pretty big buckets that I would have flipped the position on those two. I had plenty of strength. And I should have added a little bit more nuance, but I did better. Look, I was doing the best I could back then. But I've taken that philosophy through evolving. I'm hoping that it's a journey. Listen, I'm on this journey. I've made mistakes. I've advised people historically. and maybe their training, and I've rethought that over the years, that maybe their training should evolve a little bit more hip mobility and a little on shoulder mobility and a little bit less strength training until their joints are strong enough to accommodate. I think there's a difference between I take every single exercise that you could possibly use to strengthen and develop your body from more muscular, more stronger, more functional body, but you can sort of assess a risk assessment to it, or place it someplace on a scale. And so some exercises, it's easy to tell somebody deadlifts are absolutely awesome to make you strong, but there's a risk involved.
Yes.
So let's take that category real quick of the deadlift. Yeah. And most people think of one way to deadlift. What if I showed you 5 deadlift variations and we find the one that's best for you? That's where you're drilling into the details and really able to help somebody meaningfully.
Right. That's very important. I know where you're going with that. I want to read a quote you from the Muscle and Fitness, one of the Muscle Fitness articles, and it talks about something interesting, where you say the keys to winning the battle against time: squats, goblet squats, front squats, single leg body weight squats. Your quote was, as your life gets closer and closer to the end, you won't be wishing you'd done more cardio. That's an homage to my friend John Defendis. Who's,
yeah.
Do you know John?
I've read a lot of his stuff.
Yeah, John's a good friend. John's bringing me down to the Shark Tank in South Carolina, I think, to kill me through training. Well, he knows I do cardio, Pete, and he doesn't, his thing is intense weights, no cardio. But in any event, let me finish your statement. You'll be wishing you got off. In other words, you won't be wishing you've done more cardio when you're older. You'll be wishing you can get off the toilet. And how do you do that? You squat. So are you prioritizing for people who are a little more August in years, older, to do more lower body work versus anything else?
I'm encouraging people. I'm sorry, I just had to make
you're okay, man.
There, I wouldn't lose my battery. I'm encouraging people to exercise their body not only for their requirements today, but for the requirements necessary to live a long, healthy life. And the term I'll attach to that would be health span. For example, the second or third most common reason why people that live alone call 911, elderly people that reside in, but just think of your friends and neighbors that live in an apartment, elderly people by themselves. The number one reason that they call is because they can't get off the toilet.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. I didn't know that.
And if you can't think of it, my friend, if you can't get off the toilet, you've got a big problem, and you're going to have to call someone to help you. And by the way, that's the moment, the devastating moment that your independence is gone, and it's never coming back unless you could figure out a way to make a comeback through. And the only way to do it is to strengthen your body. It's a terrible thing to say for a child, right? To say, Mom, Dad, you can't live alone anymore. And that reason is going to be because they can't, probably because it's almost always going to be because they can't get off the toilet or can't get off the floor.
Wow.
What are the requirements to do these two things? But it's just easier to focus and to visualize the toilet, because what is it? Is it much different than or for that matter, sitting in a soft chair? And so what of us experienced strength trainers and bodybuilders, what do we know? When we think of that, we say, I'm doing that every time I squat. I'm doing that every time I deadlift. I'm reinforcing and strengthening that ankle, knee, and hip flexion, extension program.
Dynamic, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah,
but some people, well-intended people along the path, they get away from that. And so again, two broad categories of people. If you've never been squatting and deadlifting, and then you find yourself in that position in your life, that's an obvious problem. But what about the folks that are like us, because I've met them at the gym, and they get older and they go, I don't squat anymore. No. What are you doing for your leg training? I just do leg extensions and leg curls. That's not going to get it done. It's not going to get it done.
No.
So, one thing I want to, it's a little bit more complex than that. And I just like to make things simple for discussion purposes, but they're also part of that is mobility. So sometimes people, as they get older, they tend to get so stiff in the lower back, and that the associated iliacus and psoas and these muscles, right, that are going to pull and change the position of the pelvis, and it's going to mess things up. So it equally as important to maintain that strength of the quadriceps. And again, these are very complex. Unlike the upper arm muscle, when the bicep contracts, the tricep relaxes. This is a reciprocal inhibition principle, right? And that's how we can bend our elbow this way. But it's a much more complex muscular system in the lower body, with the quadriceps groups, the hamstrings groups, and the glutes that must work in careful unison to lengthen and contract, to move the femur and pelvis and spine, so that we can get in and out of the seated position. This movement pattern, that was the word that I was looking for earlier, must be practiced, or else we lose it. And in addition to the strength component is a mobility and a balance component. We take it for granted when we're young, but trust me, there's all kinds of people out there. Once they can't get off the toilet, it's over. Don't let that happen. Never stop squatting and deadlifting. If that means you've got to go to your physical therapist, chiropractor, or some expert to help you figure it out, do whatever you've got to do to figure it out, but don't give up on those movement patterns.
I'll tell you, I agree 100%. Quickly, sarcopenia, this mysterious loss of muscle mass from the ass, hips, and legs, particularly in men. Do you notice it?
I notice it like crazy, and it's a disaster. And the only thing and just to make everything worse than muscle wasting is if that's a horror show. But add excessive body fat, add an excessive accumulation of adipose tissue to that equation, and you've got a disaster. 72% of the population of adult Americans are overweight, 42% are obese, 10% or morbidly obese. That means they're off the mark by at least 100 pounds. This is an epidemic. We're the fattest country in the world, and it's a great big fat piece of, no pun intended, it's a great big part of why this COVID situation, which shouldn't have been nearly as disruptive, in my humble opinion, and my research and talking with medical doctors about this, but the Americans were older Americans in particular, over 60, with the comorbidity of being obese, were ripe for the taking. It's a catastrophe, and it's an interesting thing, because the wealthiest countries in the world, as we generally understand, you should understand, is tend to have the population of the most overweight people in the world. It's one, and that's been a paradigm shift. It used to be the way the world works was the poorest, the wealthiest people ate enough and they were fit, and the poorest people in the world perished of famine. They perished of wasting. They died of starvation. But all that's changed. There are still people in this world, very sadly, plenty of them, starving. However, now the wealthiest people don't just have enough to eat. They 72% at least, all right, are overeating, and for many reasons, but it's also a socioeconomic thing. We have people that are in a lower economic strata that are making poor choices. So there's all kinds of reasons that plenty of people in the United States are overeating, and every once in a while a disease, or in this case a virus, comes along that. Listen, viruses aren't even alive. They just carry signals. And this signal that got into people's body was, if you're overweight and obese and you have a comorbidity of diabetes too, which is bad news for anybody.
Blood pressure, a host of different things.
Right. Yeah. So you're gonna be targeted for death. And that's basically what happened here. The countries that had the most overweight people, like the United States, per capita were hit hardest. But I think you're going to find a very strong correlation, and I think they've already found it. And then you have other countries in the world, Sweden, for example. Have you ever met a Swede? And we all have. Were they fat? No. It's a very low incidence of being overweight in that population. By and large, their weight is on point.
Speaking of Swedes, I posted a couple of announcements about you, and we've got the Swede company, so picture of you, and one of my members is from Sweden. I won't mention his name, but he's a good guy. And he looks at me, he goes, "He's not Swedish." And I said, "No, I know, but I said it's just his role, I ironed it out nicely." Let me ask you, your clientele, do you preach, not that you would preach per se, but do you advise them to eat for fuel? Or I like to take this tact, you really should never be hungry or full, kind of stay in the middle to manage your eating style. I don't even like to use the word diet, but what's your take on that with trying to teach people how to do things differently after maybe 50, 60 years of doing things maybe not so right?
Right. I think there's a bunch of questions in there, and I'm a simple man, and you can ask questions like that regarding nutrition to a lot of people, and you could get a 2-hour answer just on that question alone.
You're right. That's true.
And the beauty is, when I do get that question, is I answer it just a simple way. And here's my approach. That's all. This is one man's approach to this. Again, a guy with a liberal arts degree that's just trying real hard to help people. And that I ask people, I'm going to help you devise the way that you're eating now is not working for you. Can we agree on that? Yes. Okay. So we're going to do something about it. And there's a couple unnegotiable and undeniable scientific facts, and a couple of personal choices that I'm going to give you. It's going to work very simple and very quickly like this. When you think about an eating strategy, and I want you to think in those terms right now, if I gave you these two choices, one of them was a fixed approach. Then a fixed would be, I wrote down everything that you should eat for every meal, every single day. You just follow that along. Carol Dweck, the renowned University of Stanford sociologist, she talked about a fixed mindset. And that were people that were not really amenable to input versus I just forgot the name of it, but a more open, adaptable mindset. But in this particular incident, when it comes to this, I find it very interesting to know. Or would you prefer? So I've given you that sort of a fixed approach to nutrition. Or would you prefer? I don't really like looking at a piece of paper or looking at an app telling me what to eat. I want to eat what I want to eat, but I need help. Right. But so that would be a I would call that like just where you're blanking on the names at this point. But that's like a free form approach to nutrition. You're going to understand there needs to be guidelines here. It's not going to be the Wild West, but yet you can eat the foods that you will choose the foods. One, you won't choose the foods. They're going to be given to you. They're chosen for you. But this one, you can choose the foods. And then so somebody says, I'll take A or B. And that puts me and the folks I work with on these two different rails. Most of the people would rather have that control and make those choices of the foods that they eat. So I'll say, okay, good. So, but here's the thing. Since we cannot change Newton's law, second law of thermodynamics, which states that we have to consume fewer calories if we want to lose weight. And calories, by the way, are a unit of measurement. We need to consume fewer calories than we consume. We need to burn more calories than we consume, or just simply consume fewer calories than we burn off. So your metabolism and your exercise, that's a category, and we'll call that 2,000 calories a day. That's where you're at. And if you want to lose weight, you have to eat less than 2,000 calories a day to effectively elicit a response where you're going to lose weight. Exercise separate. We want that to be almost entirely fat weight, but we got to work that out with the exercise thing too. And so I say, okay, so no matter what you eat, you've got to get less than calories than what you're. So fewer calories than what you actually burn. Right. Where your metabolism is at. Now, having said that, and I go into a little bit more. One quick example is, let me go straight to the point. we talk about three macronutrients: proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. And depending on the diet you're talking about, and I'm versed in everything. We live in it. Confucius said we live in interesting times. We have people that are big proponents of the paleo diet, and then the Mediterranean diet, right? And then the Pritikin diet, and then we got the plant-based, all plants, and then over here we've got the carnivore diet, all meat. Guess what? We got everything covered. They all work. They will all work, provided what? You adhere to Newton's second law of thermodynamics. You consume fewer calories than you're able to burn. You've got to eat less, right? You can do it by eating plants, and you can do it by eating meat and everything in between. I have found this, and this goes back to a bodybuilding principle that I've never been able to shake, and there's lots of evidence to prove. That's why the physiques of going back as far as Sergio Oliva are so absolutely outstanding by any standard. I could say his physique is better than the guys that get on stage today, but you might want to throw a pie at me for saying that. That's just my personal.
Yeah, we do that here every day. It's okay.
Okay, so Sergio Oliva and the giants of the golden era, and Arnold and Frank Zane, their physiques.
Why do they collectively look different? Like, their bodybuilding today is bodybuilding, but those bodybuilding endeavors are not defined the same. Why do they all?
At some point, the judging. It's a subjective judging. It took on its own beast, and they went for the size monsters. That's my judgment. And they disregarded the importance of having a tiny waist. And once they let that horse out of the barn, it just became a bunch of guys with a big waist. That's my judgment. But here's the principles of the way that golden era guys eat that I could never shake, and is this: they prioritized protein.
Yes.
They did, and I think that's still necessary. And if some people count macros, and you have to count all three of those macros to do that right, I think it's a lot of work. And if you want to count all those macros, great. But I'm a simple man, and I find what works best. And a lot of people that I help, and I'm giving it all away here, and that is just count your protein. Just count your protein.
Listen, you are giving a lot of great information. Really, people want results, and as long as you're cultivating those results healthfully, keep it simple, because, nobody ever comes into my office and challenges me as to how many bones are in the spine. They just want me to get my team. They don't give a shit, and they shouldn't. The people who do come and challenge you, you don't want them as clients anyhow. Let's do the 5 questions here, Pete, because I've kept you for 2 hours, man. My God, I'm like visiting Hollywood and the NFL and all this stuff here. Okay, so I get questions from people, and I get a lot of stuff, and this is kind of an amalgamate. I mixed it up a little. Number one, you played in the NFL. So Joe Montana or Patrick Mahomes?
Joe Montana, a longer track record, and I played against him personally. I put my hands on him personally. He was.
Did you take him down? Did you stack him?
Yes.
Did you?
And he was special. And Patrick Mahomes may well be, but it's going to take a decade to understand if he will have the impact on the game that Joe Montana had.
When you sack a quarterback, what does he say to you? is there like
get off of me?
Who was the hardest that you ever sacked? Like, did you ever get one of those flush, when you really hit, that connection that you feel?
Dave Craig, the quarterback.
Seattle, right? Seattle.
He bounced around, but at that time he was on the Seahawks.
Oh, okay.
And I hit him, and it was a strip sack, and got the ball out, and hit him hard. It was good. It was a good play. It was good. Felt good.
Toughest lineman you ever went against?
I got to hedge my bet, and it's an interesting because I was his teammate with the Bengals, and then I played against him, and that was Anthony Munoz.
Oh yeah, Hall of Famer.
Hall of Famer. I think Anthony Munoz is he's the greatest offensive lineman of my generation, and he's as outstanding he was as a football player. I know personally, and I actually saw him 3 years back when I was in Minnesota when the Super Bowl was there during the press week, and I ran into him when we had a chance to catch up. But he's as good a player as he was. He's a better man.
Yeah, I've heard that, and that's very on this show, and of course I've heard very good things about you. I get a lot of suggestions. I've been very fortunate. Nobody has told me no, really, for the most part. But there's a couple of people that have been suggested, and I see things about them. Maybe they're not very nice. They don't come off the right way. Maybe there's questions with the character. And you know what? I don't judge them. I just don't put them on here because I don't care what they're espousing or what they've achieved. If they're lacking certain elements in their humanity, and look, I've got quirks. I'm not Gandhi or anything. Just won't. I'd rather not talk to them. There's plenty of other good people. Man, that's good to know. That's a really good. And I've heard that. When you were playing, because you were very strong, we already know that 465 bench right in college, especially for a guy with long arms.
500 in the NFL.
500 in the NFL. Wow. Who was the strongest in the NFL at that time?
I think it was Terry Long. Terry Long was Terry Long. No relation to Howie. Terry Long's African American. He was an offensive guard for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I have a picture of him on the wall behind me. And he's right next to Mike Webster, was part of that offensive line. Wow. And but here's my quick story. He was famously strong, and he was the shortest offensive lineman in the NFL at 6'2", and people say, how could you play line? You're only 6'2", but he did it. And so I actually became very good friends with him. Well, we played in an college all-star game together called the Blue-Gray All-Star Game, which is the North against the South. They don't play it anymore, but it was a great experience. And Terry Long went to East Carolina, but he was, instead of being like, we were all 21, 22 years old, he was 25. And I was like, how is he 25?
In college, Pete?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Because he went from high school to the Army.
Wow.
For 4 years. Yeah.
Wow.
And then he went to East Carolina and walked on and became an All-American. And then I think he was a second-round pick with the Steelers. And I ended up lining up against him a number of times. And he fantastic strength, great guy. Unfortunately, he became and it's coincidentally, Mike Webster was the first player where they discovered, after his death in an autopsy, that he had CTE. Yeah, Mike Webster. So Mike Webster and the doctor, Bennett Amalu, that was the Pittsburgh medical examiner that discovered it. God bless Bennett Amalu. And but coincidentally, I guess a few years later, after Mike Webster died, Terry Long committed suicide.
No.
And he had CTE. So God rest his soul. But I have fond memories of him. He was a good man, and I think technically the strongest player of our generation in the NFL.
Did you know Junior Seau, number one, and number two, is there sometimes this, I don't know if I want to call it a syndrome, someone who's prolifically strong like Terry Long, but that strength doesn't translate to the football field?
Oh, absolutely. I did not know Junior. I never met him.
Okay.
And I will tell you that the abject strength, there's different ways we can qualify strength. And I used to talk to Fred Hatfield about this quite a bit. In one of his books, I'm looking at it on the bookshelf, there's a book called Power, which is the book still holds up, and he talks about the different types of strength. But that abject strength, like I can move this way from here to here, provides only a limited amount of information to how that's going to work on the athletic playing field. We know it works in a powerlifting setting, or probably a strongman setting. But when you're doing something more athletic, we have to find. I believe this. All athletes, when using football as an example, because I can speak to that, I know most about it, is that we need to find that sweet spot. You want to be strong enough to optimize your opportunity to do the things you need to do. And by the way, if you're a defensive end or if you're a wide receiver, they're much different requirements and how strong you need to be. But based on the position that you play, and football is very specialized that way, but you need to be just to find that sweet spot, just strong enough. More strength than that even if it doesn't work against you, when you have so many things to consider in your preparation to be a very good football player, which is, for example, mobility, balance, power, flexibility, suddenness, and motor, all akin to motor control, all those things are so important. you only have so much time in a day and so many resources to train for all that stuff. So you should leave something in the bucket, as they would say, if you are really, really strong, and then maybe work on your mobility. Or somebody who's like super Gumby flexible, but they're not really that strong. They need to put their nose to the grindstone on their strength development.
So strong enough obviously is important. Makes a lot of sense. The number one thing you learned from Clint Eastwood, if you could think of one thing that sticks with you.
Grace.
Just being around somebody
yeah.
like that. I believe we're all sacks of cells, Pete, to give you a little pseudoscience. What makes us different is how we direct our brain chemistry and thereby the decisions we make and whatnot. So obviously, he has separated himself far afield from the crowd, and you were able to be around him. So again, just bloviating here, but what would that be if you could think of something?
Yeah, no, it's the grace with which he conducted himself. And I had a chance to see him in a number of different settings. A movie set can be a volatile place. It can be very peaceful, particularly if a scene requires peace and quiet. But it's up to the director and the first assistant to director, which is really the right hand. That's the position that actually really controls the set. And I had the chance to see, when things went wrong. I'll give you an example of where things kind of went terribly wrong. We were shooting a scene in Vieques, in this island in Puerto Rico that was doubling as the island of Grenada, where the true story is U.S. Army went in and rescued a bunch of medical school students from, I think it was St. John's Medical University there. It's a true story. And we actually played Marines. It was actually Army that did it, but things were changed we took a dramatic license.
Was the military upset with that slight, or
the reason that happened is something of film legend. So the producer of that movie was a guy named Fritz Maines, who I became quite close with. And he told me the story. The script Clint had for a couple of years, and he loved it. He was just waiting for the right chance to make it. And it was written about this actual operation. It was Army. And then they went shortly before production to begin to go to Fritz and Clint went together to the Pentagon to get the Army to get their blessing on this movie so that they could officially and in writing use Army uniforms and things. And when they got there, they had sent them the script ahead of time. They rejected it.
Really?
And so they made a quick, and Fritz was a prior Marine himself. He said, let's talk to the guys it surprised him. Let's talk to the guys over in the Marine Corps. And they read it and they said, we'll get behind this. The rest is history.
Wow.
So we get over there and we're shooting this scene. It's very hot. It's very humid. It's the middle of the day. There's just one camera pointing like this. And it's a room full of us actors, Clint, all the guys and the guns and the uniforms, and about 200 extras that were the medical students and the instructors and all this in a small room. And there was no air conditioning. It was just primitive. It was hot. And the one camera we had, it breaks.
Oh, God.
Oh man, and everybody's just like hotter than can be. So and I heard
forgive me, but is that kind of like I read a little. Lance, my friend Lance knows a lot about production and whatnot, but aren't there setups where there's only one camera and then they have multiple cameras? So that was one of those things where
So here was the thing, right? So they had said, and they have redundant systems, right? So they've got multiple cameras. So, right. But the problem was apparently that a camera had broken the day before, and that there was a third camera available, but it was apparently about a half an hour away and about an hour round trip, that kind of thing. So the first AD came over to the actors and then, and explained to us, and they explained to the bullhorn that we're going to have to wait about an hour. Okay, fine. And so guys are just kind of hunkered down to sit there for about an hour or so. And then 15 minutes later, you hear this piano sound. And what is that? In this class, because we were literally in a classroom, there was a stand-up piano. And because it was a buzz of everyone just talking and grumbling. Clint had sat down and it just started going, just started playing this beautiful song. And it took a little minute to figure it out, what was going on. And then it got quieter and quieter. The room, 200 people, it got deadly silent. And all you heard was Clint play the piano for the next 20 minutes.
Wow. And you didn't know he had that talent, or just?
I didn't know. And
Did he
never
do that did he do that to restore calm or something, do you think?
I would like to ask him. It was grace. It was beautiful.
You know what he was? He was probably just a guy who was self-actualizing, man, you know?
Yeah. You know, and when somebody came in and said, "Oh, I got the camera," he finished the song, got up, never said a word, went off, put the cap, boom, 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 set, and we shot. We go.
Like Ronnie Coleman would say, "Ain't nothing but a peanut." That's a cool story. Hey, give us a suggestion. Listen, a lot of the folks in the bodybuilding fitness world, it's so huge now. When you and I got in, it was 4 pros a year and whatnot. It was very small. You knew everybody. But now a lot of guys and women want to get into show business or acting. And I know it's very nebulous and difficult, as you hear, but you know what? Everything is hard. The grass isn't greener. All work is hard. No matter what, just be happy. Listen, when I wake up every day, I've won lotto as long as I woke up, and then it's up to me to maybe spend the currency, with some guidance and smartness. Suggest for those wanting to get into acting, maybe one good, strong tip if they're from the fitness world. What can they do or optimize their chances? You're in there now. You're still getting gigs. You've got a SAG card and all that, and all this hard stuff to do. You've lived a life well lived. You've done all this stuff. You've accrued all of these achievements and knowledge.
Yeah, I'm shooting a commercial next week. So
no kidding.
It's still going on, yeah.
What's it for? Can I ask?
I don't think I could tell you.
All right, no.
I know what it is, but I don't think I should say. But
you don't want some guy in an office in Connecticut, the nutmeg state, to mess up your chances. Because then you'll have to rip my head off, and you know what comes next.
Okay, so here's my advice is, and I think this is if you can get I think you can give your plan to be an actor and to break into the business, if that's what you aspire to do. I say go for it. And I think if you get these two sort of fundamental pieces going at the same time, if you can get them going, it'll serve you well, position you. All I say to people as a coach, as like a fitness coach or whatever I'm coaching, is to say, I can't make the plays for you, can't make the moves for you, but I can position you for success. And I would do these two things. Number one, study with the best person you can find. And you might have to try a handful of different acting classes, maybe a bunch before you find somebody, go based on referrals and budget, and study your craft so that you can, so you can have technical knowledge and also bring the confidence to those auditions. The competition is steep. So study your craft and have that much personal pride and care about what it is you want to do. And the second thing is figure out a way to keep paying the bills as you go along. And that is the proverbial being a waiter or a waitress. That's absolutely fine. There's never going to be anything wrong with doing that. Or maybe it's a personal trainer, or maybe it's some kind of side hustle that you can figure out. You have more opportunity to do that with the internet and working from home today than any actor would have dreamed of when I started out in acting. So you have many choices there. And so the better you are prepared to not stress about your income for a while, maybe a long while, and I think you can effectively reconcile that if you were studying in your craft, so that if you don't have an audition for a month or two or more, no less booking anything, there's long streaks where you might not even have an agent for a while, no less an audition. So to endure that and to give you the peace of mind is to understand that you're studying your craft, because when you do get that appointment to meet with an agent and you've got zip on your resume and they look at your headshot and they turn it over and what do you got there? Not much. You say, well, you got a hope, you got a dream. And they say, where are you studying? What are you doing you want to be an actor? What are you doing?
They want to know that. They want to know that stuff.
They will say, you want to be an actor. What are you doing? What have you done today? Really? And if you go, but I no good. You say, I'm studying with so and so. And by the way, at the same time, I'm reading the biography of Stella Adler, or or, find biographies are a beautiful place. Biographies about actors, or I've got Brando over there. They're beautiful, offer beautiful insight. They want to know that your brain is working on something creatively. So let them know. Let them know what you be prepared for that question and be doing it honestly.
Maybe semi-obvious question, maybe not. Being muscular, standing out like you can't learn that. You can't teach that. You are that. So is that, unless you're being typecast, if I'm using the verbiage correctly, is that helpful or is that a hindrance?
It cuts both ways, because if you're a great big guy and you say, well, but you know, it's I'm shrinking the pond that I'm swimming in with these actors that I'm competitive with. And if you're 5'10" and you're a guy and you're 170, or a female who's 5'5" and 125 pounds, and you're going to probably have an enormous amount of competition. But the fact is, there's 10 times as many roles available to you than the big guy. And I say, don't worry about that, because when I walked into the first audition, I had a callback, but the first audition for the role of Swede.
This is the first you ever had?
It wasn't the first audition I ever had, but it was the initial audition, I should say. The callbacks mean that they've narrowed the field down to somewhere between typically 6 and 12.
Okay.
That would be a second or third callback. But the first audition, which means that's their general overview. So here it is. The script reads, like I had said earlier, 6'7", guy Swede, 23 years old, 6'7", 285 pounds. And I walked into the first audition, and there's 45 guys that look like me.
They really did.
And then
really,
when I'm walking out to go get back to my car, one guy, this guy's 6'9", this guy's 6'8", this guy's 6'4", but he's this wide, bodybuilder, power lifter. I know, I'm seeing these guys magazines. That was one example. That was all in a matter of 25 minutes.
Wow. But what do you think got the role for you in that case?
I don't know, but I'll say this. Maybe this will just kind of you're the acting, the people interested in acting out there, is I know a lot more, and I'm a much better actor now than I was then, but I think I had some good instincts. But if you get one thing right, if you can get one thing right about delivering your dialogue in an audition setting, I would say, hands down, be truthful.
Truthful, right. Yeah.
Even if you just don't nail every nuance or accent perfectly, or whatever is involved that you had in your mind for your preparation. If you come and you can be relaxed in here and you can look at somebody and be truthful, that'll always get people's attention.
You know, you can apply, these days in anything, authenticity is in short supply. And, listen, you could take the shit shoveler from Sheboygan to the highest captain of industry, and they could tell if you're not real. So kind of what you're saying there. That's great stuff. A couple more questions just about there. Hey, are the Swede shirts going to be available to the populace eventually? I love that.
I'm working on it. No, I'm glad you mentioned this. This was a mock-up, and it's just a one-off. But I'm proud of the way that this shirt came out, and I'm working with a distributor right now. So if you follow me, I'll try to keep people posted on that.
We'll pop your info in here. But that's got to be so cool, if you watch this movie sometimes and that's you, and you're forever imprinted in the annals of time and people's memory, And see, you go around and yell Swede. My license plate says Dr. Dusa, so people will sometimes come up, hey, are you Dr. Dusa? I don't know whether did I hurt them? Do they owe me money? I don't know. Are they against your guys in the stand? So I'm careful.
Funny.
Okay, almost done. Cats or dogs?
Oh, dogs. I got two big dogs.
I know, man. These dogs are awesome. And that's about it, man. Hey, I really appreciate. Hey, Pete, before we go, give me some contact, like your Instagram, if you have any other contact points where people, if they want to contract you and talk about possibly training with you or some of the other things you offer and do.
Yeah, so I'm easy to get hold of on 3 social media platforms, all at Pete Koch, Petekoch. That's on Instagram, that's on Facebook, and
wait,
LinkedIn.
I'm spelling out Pete Koch.
P-E-T-E Koch, K-O-C-H. And also on LinkedIn, and then there's PeteKoch.com, and I've got a YouTube channel for your diehard Heartbreak Ridge fans.
I joined today. What's it called? I joined it.
Oh, yeah, Pete Koch, right? That's my channel, Petekoch. And so what I did, this was before I had this facial hair going. It was 2.5 years ago. A producer friend of mine, very talented guy, he says, I think people would like to know more about your experience working on Heartbreak Ridge. Could we do a mini docuseries where we run the movie Heartbreak Ridge on a screen behind you and you discuss the scenes as we go along? It's a 6-part series that I'm proud of, and it's had over 200,000 views. I've never promoted it, but if you're really into Heartbreak Ridge, I talk about the movie.
I watched part 1 today, and I'm watching. I'm like, wow, did he do that in his house? That's really professionally done. Because I do a lot of my own tech, and I'm better than I was. But everybody has a slick and gloss. Really, it's all about the information that you deliver and the value, and it was very good.
Yeah, no, so you're right. It was done in my living room, and it was a green screen behind me, so it turns out pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, Pete, listen, like I always say, I'm honored. Truly, I am. Here we are in this moment right now, and we have this opportunity to talk to a person who's defined themselves outside of the pale and has gone a distance. You've exceeded yourself. It's like Henry Rollins from Black Flag. He's like this really hardcore guy. I was lucky enough to train with him for a while, and he says, it's all about getting down to the bare bones and finding out what you're all about. And really what that means is, you tap into, you do the things that maybe you dare to do, because most people are afraid and they leave it, and maybe someday, then they become old and they realize that it's too late. So here you are. I always like to say, and I don't just apply this to very few, but I'm glad you're out there as a paragon or example. Because all you hear is negative crap now. That's all. I mean, come on. They can't show a half hour of good stuff. They can't. They don't. But the world, there's still fertile ground to plug yourself in like you have, and you're this personage. You're almost like this caricature that people, look up to. So I thank you for that. And I think you've given a lot of good information. And, people can cherry pick. They can take a couple things. Put all your contact info, and I thank you. And so, what do you think in the future? You're going to keep training people, more movies, hopefully, or
both? Yeah, all of the above. I contain magnitude. Magnitude. There's multiple things in my mind the whole time. So I call myself a proud generalist when it comes to helping people in the physical fitness. But I also feel like my brain works that way. I don't want to let this go on without comment. That your comments about me, I appreciate them. They humble me. I would like to say this to you and have you know this, that you're doing a great service to many people. The way that you approach this interview is considerable. People should understand that of all the questions you could have asked me, you asked very meaningful questions. You made me think. You challenged me. So I enjoyed this process. I'll leave you with a quote.
Well, hold on. Before the quote, I want to thank you for that. It means a lot. But so in Hollywood, like, what is it, a Variety magazine? I wouldn't be like blackballed or anything for doing it, like an interview like this.
Not at all.
I don't know what protocol to follow. I have no idea.
They'd appreciate you, but I came up with this, and you're doing it, and you're doing it on a bigger format and platform than me, but in my own, with your show, and it's a service. And I read this quote some years ago. It stuck with me. 2 years ago, I thought to videotape myself or have my training partner help me exercising, and I thought I would put it up on social media because I thought people might want to know it. And that was a simple, because in my head, I had been processing since I had read this some time ago, that it was Albert Einstein who said, aspire not to be so much a man of wealth, but rather a man of value. Value. Yes. So I said, how can I, when I thought of value, I thought about giving back. So what if I've been so blessed. I've worked hard to accrue the knowledge and to get, and to sharpen my own blade, to get down in the trenches from a fitness and strength standpoint, sharpen my own blade. But I've also been blessed to work with great mentors like Frank Costello, my strength coach at Maryland, and Dr. Fred Hatfield. So why not give some of that back? I don't want anything in return. So I came up with this little idea that I would film a little bit fitness tip, and I would call it, I'm really trying to just make people just a little bit better. And I figured it took me about 30 seconds roughly. So I call it Making You Better 30 seconds at a time.
Well, I watched them all. Yeah, they're great.
I appreciate that.
I wonder, I ask, myself, because, well, one good thing, you're like the Rock of Gibraltar. So for me to observe that, I don't have to go to Spain now. I just watch you. But why don't I look like that? Because you are, you really rock, which is denoting that you've been like this for many, many years. But I'm sorry.
And yeah, so anyway, so that's you're giving back, I'm giving back. I think it's important for those of us that have gotten to a certain place in their lives to think about the service they could return to those and we're sort of doing it within our community, and being a doctor, that's very, very important, how you're able to reach people and help them, and in my own way. And I've had this unique connection with the military and the Marines in particular for 35 years, since Heartbreak Ridge, and they have a special place in my heart. But as a proud generalist and as a physical fitness expert and enthusiast, and I like to believe a leader from the front, I just want to help people. And if I can do that 30 seconds at a time, that's part of what I offer for the folks that choose to follow me.
You're chipping away. Tony Robbins says people are content when they're making even a little bit of progress each day. We have done that. And maybe I'll get you on here with, I'm supposed to get CT Fletcher with Chef Rush, but Chef Rush you two might be a good tandem. You're both kind of working with the same people, both military. I mean, not literally, but you played in the middle. You got a lot of knowledge here, so it's a good parlay. But we'll talk about that. But I want to thank you again. I hope you had fun. You gave me a lot of time. But very, very, this will be out there forever in perpetuity. People can come on here, and I'll send it to you. It's going to be on all my channels, YouTube. Tomorrow night, I've got Carlo Filippone, one of the top food prep companies in the country. Who else? My good friend Gino Cacavalli. He created the Resist exercise system. John Meadows, that's next week. And then Skip Robinson, we talked about him. He joined in. He's on Friday. So a lot of good stuff. They're good. These guys are going to have to bring some heavy bats to measure what we did with you tonight, Pete. And man, I'm going to go tousle my hair right now because I'm feeling rather big.
Me too.
I think, man, you're hanging. You got it all together, my man. But I want to thank you again. I'll shoot you a note after this, all right, Pete? And thank you for your time, man.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Doc.
Fantastic. You have a great night, man. Thank you. And good night, everybody. See you tomorrow. Thank you.